Happy New Year to fellow colleagues and members of the staff, and also welcome to the members of the public. This meeting has been live streamed and we have wonderful new technology here today. So before I call for apologies, I'll ask our democracy leader, Una Hopkins, to explain the intricacies of this new microphone system, because it's almighty powerful up here in this seat, I can tell you. So, Una.
Good morning, members. So just like to draw your attention to the new microphone and sound system that we have. The chamber has been updated over the Christmas break. The system is designed for better quality for our live streaming and for also our audience and for your ability to contribute within meetings. The system is designed to stay on all the time, so just be aware that paper shuffling and conversations around you could be picked up by the system. If you need to, press the green button and that will deactivate your microphone, but please remember to turn it back on when you're talking. The system also has an override system, so if the chair in the process of chairing the meeting needs to, his microphone or her microphone, whenever there's a ranking, which will mean that the other conversation will die down, chair the meeting accordingly. I think that's all.
Yes, Your Worship.
Later, to hear us better. It used to be a bit of a crackle, and you've sometimes felt you missed things. So after the meeting, if you want to let us know, we'd appreciate that.
Yeah, some feedback. Yes, Councillor Maxwell. Just leave it on green.
Leave it on green.
Do you turn it off?
Your voice will the microphone. Okay. All right. Thank you for that, Una. And feedback from the community would be advisable. They can do that on the website or. Firstly, I'd like to open and welcome everyone as I have done. Welcome to the media. Welcome to members of the. I can sense some feedback already. I don't know why. Did you hear that? Yeah, okay. Also, don't think we've thrown the baby out with the bathwater. Fantastic microphones have now been set up, and so when we have our committee meeting, microphoned as well, which is wonderful. There's no need to call for any apologies. I believe everybody is present. For any declarations of interest, and just remind members, that's community board members, Te Taru and colleagues, that when you declare, if you're thinking of declaring a declaration of pecuniary or perceived interest, it's your individual assessment as to for me to determine that from the chair, or for staff to determine audit department that if you believe you have a conflict of interest, you need to declare that and desist from any discussion or debate. What I had to do in terms of sale of property, being a real estate agent, I had to get a ruling from the audit department, and discussions and or voting. If I'm invited to, or the deputy chair, whoever's in the chair, I am at liberty to, from a professional point of view, but certainly not allowed to vote. So I just wanted to lay the ground rules down very, very firmly, so just to remind my colleagues of their roles and responsibilities. Deputy Mayor Dave Donaldson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I have an interest in, and I'll be sitting with the presenter.
Thank you, Councillor Donaldson.
Te Akamori and one of the displays inside Te Akamori.
Thank you.
Is it working?
Right. So thank you for those declarations of interest. Are there any urgent items not on the agenda which members want me to consider for any reason are urgent enough to be dealt with at this meeting? Councillor Gould.
Two items. Tree on Springfield Road, which we're probably getting a report sometime in the future around Rotorua because of the... And the second one is about the Audit New Zealand report, which we as councillors received on the 19th of January.
Order, Mr. Chair.
Yes, Your Worship.
If it is helpful to the councillor, there is a police and way included, and before we can discuss at all the trees.
Maybe to assist Councillor Gould, we could have that discussion in confidential because there is...
I'm happy to bring up the audit report New Zealand in confidential because some of those...
I'm talking about the trees as well.
Yep.
Because there, as Her Worship has pointed out,
Correct.
there is a police inquiry and other inquiries going in occupational safety and health, and we don't want to jeopardise those investigations because staff would have to report on what they know. So I think it's really important that we not interpret that we're the be-all and end-all. Councillor Donaldson, you can leave the microphone as far away as you like. It picks it up beautifully. Councillor Donaldson.
Chair, the audit report is a public document. It's discoverable. And I think it's appropriate, perhaps, that that's covered off in Mr. Thomas's Mr. Colley's presentation.
Okay. I'll go back to Councillor Gould. Councillor Gould, is it of a confidential nature that you believe?
Yes, it is, because it's quite sensitive for council. Okay,
I'd be guided by that, Deputy Mayor Donaldson. So we'll revert that over to confidential along with the trees.
Well,
yes, Your Worship?
Mr. Chair, I'm happy for it to be in public as part of Thomas Colley's report. I don't think there's anything in there that
I've asked from the Chair, Your Worship, I have to respect the member's request that it does go into confidential. Only he will know, unless he divulges to us now the confidential nature of that. He's chosen that and asked the Chair for it to be considered in confidential. I've got to take the member's word at that.
I'm happy with that.
There's two very confidential matters in that report which are very sensitive, and if it got out in the public arena, it wouldn't do very good publicity for the Rotorua Lakes Council.
All the people involved. That's, okay. Thank you. I'll take your guidance on that.
That's grounds of natural justice that you would...
Mr. Chairman, can I just ask a question?
Your Worship,
Thank
Your
you.
Worship, I was going to say. Councillor Okawa.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It's in relation to the first question from Councillor Gould on the trees. I appreciate that there's an investigation going on, so that should not... we shouldn't be hindering that by discussing that particular issue. But will we at some stage be receiving some sort of an update on our the trees that are could be quite vulnerable because we're getting storms, and it is an interest, obviously.
I'll ask the acting CEO, JP, to make comment.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My green button too. Thank you. Councillor, we can certainly give you an update and confidential about what's happening in regard to the investigation and some other matters we'd just like to update you on, and that way we can at least talk to you about also what that means for trees more widely across the district as well. So happy to give an update.
In confidential. Can I just give you one tip with regard to your microphones? Just leave them on green and push them as far away as you can so you're not tempted to press the buttons. Okay. Right, let's get into the agenda. Pardon? Oh, you want to have a private talk? Well, you turn it off if you want to have a private talk with your colleague.
I'd like to add something in agenda items.
Councillor Kumar.
Thank you, Chairperson. I just wanted to know if there was, under operations and monitoring, a verification of the day the Hikoi came to the council to do the presentation, as to what, if there's a report being done as to why the doors were closed. Some were allowed to come in and some weren't. So is there any reason why the doors were closed to them?
Oh, I don't think that's a matter for immediately to be discussed, but I'm happy to put it at the end of the agenda.
I think it's very important. It's probably a first that has ever happened.
You can raise it at the end of the agenda. Thank you, Councillor Kumar. All right, first up today is some positive news for Rotorua. A presentation by Ariki Tibble, the Crankworks event director. We'll welcome Ariki to Rotorua Lakes Council, and we look forward to your presentation. And of course, Councillor Donaldson, who declared an interest earlier, is part of is on the management company that run Crankworks Rotorua, and we're excited about. It's not far away, and I hope everything's going for you. So welcome, Ariki, and look forward to your presentation.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. So my interest is I'm a director and chairman of the board of Mountain Bike Events Limited, which holds the licence for Crankworks, and Ariki is the event director as of this year. He's been event manager before. He's the event director, so it all rests on him to make it go seamlessly, and he'll tell us all about it.
Ngā mihi nui kia koutou katoa. Thank you for having me here today. I thought I'd share a bit of an update about what's happening with Crankworks for 2018. It's only approximately 7 weeks away, so we're definitely in the heat of it all at the moment. I've got a quick video just to show you, which kind of frames the follow-up of my presentation. So if we could perhaps go on that to start.
There are thousands of great places to ride your bike on planet Earth.
100 or so of them stand out as really amazing.
10 of those are musts.
The must-go, must-ride destinations.
The locations that combine killer trails, remarkable hospitality, and the best events. The must-ride before you die places.
This is one of them. If you've already visited, you totally know. If you haven't ridden Rotorua and experienced Crankworks, what exactly are you waiting for?
Cool. So that's a video that we've been pushing out internationally at the moment, and that was going out in November, December, and recently as well. I guess what it does is it sort of encapsulates something that I've always
At the bottom of the world, there's a beautiful place, a little slice of mountain biking paradise we call Rotorua, New Zealand. What's it going to be?
Technology.
I guess it encapsulates what we've always said, which is that Crankworks, at least the international facing part of it, is really about a promise to the international visitors that Rotorua is a genuine international mountain biking mecca. And there's kind of a few parts to what make up a mecca in my books. One part of that is having the natural resources, and we've definitely got that with the trails and the dirt. We've got an amazing gem right on our doorstep. Second part to that's infrastructure, and seeing the investment in infrastructure by both private and public parties over the last sort of 12 months is pretty tangible. You can see it, and so that's super important as well. But the most important out of the three priorities that I think matter are our people and our community. And so what I thought I'd do is share with you a bit of an update on ways in which we're trying to engage our people in our community, because that is what really shapes this destination as a mecca. If we could just go to the next slide. On the one hand, the ways in which we engage the community around finding ways for people to fall in love with the event and with mountain biking in general. The other way is finding pathways for people who might not otherwise be involved to get involved. So here's a few examples of things that we're working on for 2018. First one's Share the Ride. Share the Ride's a program that we partner with Pink Bike, which is the world's biggest mountain biking media outlet, and some of our sponsors like Giant, to find ways to get young kids involved in mountain biking. This year we're focusing on Macoya Intermediate, so every child in Macoya Intermediate will be taken out into the forest. They'll be given coaching lessons and the opportunity to ride our hire bikes at no cost. And then the second part to it is Share the Ride Families, and the focus of that is to identify 10 young people from low socioeconomic families and get them and their families out riding bikes in the forest with our professional instructors for about 6 weeks leading into the event. They then turn up at the event and are presented with brand new bikes from Giant. So a super cool program that we run. We're getting a lot of requests from previous attendees to share the ride in the previous years who are wanting to come back and sort of toe talk and support the new ones coming through. Another example is our National Schools Mountain Biking Champs. Last year we had around 300 attendees come across to attend the event. We really want this to be the equivalent of a Māori Cup or the Wakaama Nationals, but for mountain biking, and obviously here in Rotorua as part of Crankworks. There's no other platform in the Southern Hemisphere where secondary school students get to come and get involved in the hype and ride next to heroes and ride on some of the best trails in the world. So that's something we're really excited about, and we're hoping to see that grow beyond the 300 that we had in 2017. We got quite a lot of feedback last year around ticket prices, and one of the things that we've done this year is we've really slashed our ticket prices to try and make the event more accessible for our local community. As an example, a full event pass right now is on sale for $120. That allows 2 adults and 3 children to come and attend the event. The same pass would have cost them $240 last year. And for those who are really onto it, they'll realise that it's cheaper for 2 adults, to buy a family pass than it is to buy 2 separate adult passes. So that's a little secret for everybody here. We've also got 6 free days. We've got our first 4 days are in public locations around Rotorua, and the idea behind that is to showcase some of our hidden gems. And then we're extending the Locals Days on site. In previous years we've publicised 1 Locals Day. This year we're going to do 2, and we're bringing one of the crowd favourites, the Pump Track event, into one of those Locals Days so that our Rotorua community can go up there and enjoy it at no cost. There's a bunch of other sort of things that we're working on in the pipeline as well, but we'll probably release that over the next couple of weeks. And then our Educate program. And Educate is really finding ways to scaffold the curriculum into some of these amazing opportunities that we have around Crankworks. The way I sort of think about it is that we've got the keys to the kingdom of this event, and we need to find ways to leverage it in any way, shape or form that we can. And one way that we've identified is by getting NCEA moderation across 2 different courses in geography and advanced physical education to allow secondary school students to learn about the event, the factors that led to Rotorua winning and delivering this event, and then they get to come up on site and get a peek behind the curtains of the machinations of how the event works. So a bunch of local schools are on board, and it's even going wider than that, with schools from around the Bay of Plenty and New Zealand signing up to come along and get involved in the Educate program as well. In addition to that, this year I've spoken a little bit about trying to showcase the different sites in Rotorua, and a few examples. We're taking our first 3 of our first 4 events will be run at Waipa this year, with the new developments from Red Stag and the roading infrastructure that's been put in place out there. I know that our international visitors are going to turn up, and what they're going to see and experience is going to be markedly different to anything that they've seen in the past. And it's a step in that direction of improving the infrastructure and fulfilling that promise of Rotorua being that international mountain biking mecca. So the first few days at Waipa, the build of a dual slalom track, which has had some attention over the previous couple of months. We will be going ahead with that and looking to make an announcement later today. We've had a bunch of different options across the city that we've been considering, and pleased to say we've landed on an outcome, and are looking forward to announcing that as well. The third one is the Redwoods Downhill. We had a bunch of international riders who had indicated that Rotorua is the place to come to ride at Skyline, and then they're going to fly down to Queenstown. And we thought that was a little bit off, and what we realised was a bunch of them are actually flying into the city, riding up at Skyline for the week, and not even getting out to the forest in some cases. So one way we can change that is by running an event in the forest as well. So the Redwoods Downhill will run on one of our classic national downhill trails in the forest. And so what's super exciting about that is it'll be very low key, and we'll have some of our local riders compete against the absolute world's best in one of our classic downhill trails. So that's pretty cool as well. Eat Street are activating this year. They've coordinated themselves and have confirmed that they will have a big screen in place down there, and we'll be jumping on board and supporting by running our opening ceremony down there and a deep summer photo competition later in the week as well. So looking forward to seeing Eat Street really light up for 2018. Another thing that we're trying to do is timestamp the on-site experience for people up at Skyline. So we're doing a bit of a relocation of the pump track. Again, this is based upon feedback that we received. Every year for the event, we end up with approximately 250 to 300 improvements that we would like to make, and it's based upon feedback that we get through our research with the community, as well as surveying participants and athletes and media on site. And one of the things that we've been told is that the Kids Works area was too far out of the way, and we needed to find a way to make it more integrated, closer for parents to be able to access facilities on site, such as the toilets and cafe and food. And so we've heeded the call, and we've ended up swapping the Kids Works area with the pump track area. So it's a win-win in the sense that the Kids Works arena will be down in the main expo site now, super close to all of those facilities that have been requested, and the pump track area will be up where the Kids Works area was, and that gives us an opportunity to increase capacity. So on the one hand, by creating the new site, and on the other hand, by making it a locals day, we can get as many people as possible around that to enjoy it. So spreading the benefits. So coming back to those objectives of finding pathways for the community and different sectors of the community to find their way into the event, and on the other hand, finding ways for the community to fall in love with both Crankworks and the event of mountain biking. And that pretty much concludes my slide.
Thank you very much, Ariki. Are there any questions? Councillor Gould.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for your presentation today. I've had a number of phone calls from residents of Rotorua concerned about the tree trust. Can we have an assurance today that the tree trust will not be used for Crankworks?
Yes, I can give you that assurance.
Councillor Donaldson.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair, through you. We can give that assurance. We'll be releasing the course today, as Ari said, in a media release. Look, I've attended a site meeting up there, heard what residents said. I've seen some of the things that have been said online, which personally I find offensive because, I've sponsored 2 trees up there in memory of significant events in my life, and we wouldn't be that insensitive. So the proposed course at Centennial Park was going nowhere near any of the trees. However, that's not where we're taking the course.
Councillor Bentley.
Thank you. Thanks for your presentation, Ricky. The one thing you didn't seem to mention today, and that has been a part of Crankworks since day one, was the council acts as a guarantor towards it. And last year, I understand you ran at a very modest profit. How much do you anticipate being able to pay back council for its past contributions?
Councillor Donaldson.
Yep. So the board has looked at the issue. Our surplus was in the region of $10,000 last year. We're up $135,000 against the underwrite, negative against the underwrite at present. We have not been in a position, in fact we were at risk of having to dip into the underwrite further to cash flow. So we still have receivables payable from last year's event, and so we've been able to continue with the preparations for 2018 and already incurring costs in that regard without going further into the underwrite, and that's where we're at present. We have, of course, come under pressure from funders who want more community benefits from the event, and so some of those funders that's led to us cutting ticket prices. So it's a balancing act for us as to income in and what we can afford to repay at this stage. We would like to eventually repay that underwrite, but we also hear the calls to make it more available and affordable for members of the community. And we also have significant funders have indicated lesser contributions, and the MBIE contribution tapers off over the 5 years out to 2021. So we have to balance all of that together at this stage. I can't make any guarantees on how much we can repay in regard to the underwrite, but we're absolutely focused on running the event at a surplus or at the worst at a break even.
Councillor Bentley? No follow-up? Okay. Councillor Tetzel?
Thank you, Mr Chair, and thank you, David Naidaki, for your presentation. As some people are aware, the Rotorua Crankworks is the only one that does charge, and I have previously expressed serious concerns about the affordability for our families. So I'd just like to thank you for the amazing job that you have done, but also ask, and sorry to put this on you as our acting Chief Executive, but I did request our Chief Executive to explore the options on what Council can do to support this affordability and not just leave it on their shoulders, because as you know, Council was a 49% shareholder in the Crankworks. So whether you can answer that question now or come back to us later, but I would really like to know what we are doing as Council to assist them to make this affordable.
Through Mr Chair, and thank you for the apologies in advance, Councillor. I think we'd have to come back to you with some more information and spend some time with the organisation and just be clear about whether there is any ways we can provide some additional support in that space. So I think that request is very much for us to report back then.
So your support, just to clarify, Councillor Tetzel, your support that you're thinking of garnering is involving the lower socioeconomic, the people who can't afford $120 to attend some of the events. Is that where you're heading?
Yes, absolutely, and also just continue to support them to make this a more affordable event that we can.
Okay. Councillor Donaldson, would you like to respond? Oh,
Yes,
Mr Donaldson.
Thank you, through you, Mr Chair. Thank you for those comments, Councillor Tapsell. One of the balances we have is, as a board, we can reduce the expense of running the event by seriously curtailing the program and cutting back. It's quite expensive to run a lot of those community events. They all need health and safety, all need traffic management, or a lot of them need traffic management. So there are significant costs, but the key funders want to see those events and the community involved in the festival. So it's that balancing act, and we would welcome the opportunity of Council reconsidering.
Your Worship, the Mayor.
Well done on the changes each year that we see that I think are reflective of what we wanted to see, and especially the pricing schedule, I think, has made it very much more attainable for families. That was a Christmas present every family that I know got, and well received, because it was something that they may not have been able to do. For me, the question is the volunteer base, and because you're adding new additions to it, what is your target for volunteers? And it's always been something that's been run by volunteers in the community. How's that going?
Our recruitment for volunteers is kicking off very shortly. It's already open on our website, but we'll be doing a public-facing push in the next couple of weeks. We haven't had any trouble in the past getting the number of volunteers that we need. They flood through the doors, and like I've said in the past, 95% of the volunteers who come on board are Rotorua locals. We needed 280 in 2016. We needed 306 in 2017. We're probably going to need around 330 to 350 in 2018. So, yeah, absolutely, it's a challenge every time we try and add new things to the event. We try and make things more accessible for the local community. We're really pushing the problem to different places, and what we're hoping for at the moment is that by making it more accessible for locals through our pricing structure, we're getting more volume in outsiders coming into the region who will buy tickets and make sure that we hit our revenue targets on that front. So that's on the financial side, but there's also the burden that gets borne on the human resource side as well. So it remains to be seen where we get the 330 to 350. It also remains to be seen if we get the ticket sales. So these are the risks that we take on board. But at this stage, I'd be pretty confident that we'll hit the target for the volunteers and we'll get that workforce that we need.
Thank you, Ariki. Yes, you wish.
Just a supplementary on that. I mean, that's an aspect that council could assist on our media outlets too. But who coordinates the volunteers?
We have a volunteer manager called Bernice Nell, supported by another member of our community, Mal Rangitutia, and the two of them are kind of the engine behind our volunteer recruitment drive, and they're the volunteer managers that look after everybody. But any introductions can come through me in the first instance, and I can link them in so that we can promote through the right channels.
Ariki, just before we go to Councillor Rakawa Tate, the advent of the 6 free events, is that in some way addressing some of the issues that Councillor Tapsell is along the lines of what Councillor Tapsell's thinking of?
It's in direct response to Councillor Tapsell's concerns raised last year, along with many others who have spoken about that in the past, including spectators and fans and other members of the community. So yes, what we're doing on that front is an attempt to try and make the event more accessible for our local community.
Thank you. Councillor Rakawa Tate. Don't touch your button.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Yes, look, it was always going to be, we believed it was always going to be about 5 years before you could see any light at the end of the tunnel in terms of financial return. So, and I think the continuous improvements that you've been making from the feedback that you get each year hasn't come cheap either. So you're to be congratulated on that. But I believe you're right, because the significant funders will say, oh, hello, here's the proposal again. So they'll be looking to see, I presume, that you're widening your base of funders or sponsors. And now that we've seen that it wasn't just an overnight wonder, that it is world-class, it's a world-class event, is there the potential to increase or bring on board new sponsors and new funders? Is that something that you're constantly looking for or looking to do? Thank you.
Absolutely, yeah, that's a great question, and it's a race in a sense, because what we're trying to do is get our commercial revenues to increase at a rate that's faster than which our other revenue sources are withdrawing. And so that's a constant challenge that we're facing. I think in 2017 what we could have done is wrap up our licence, and we could have quite easily made a cut to a bunch of our different programs that we were focused on last year, and I think we could have paid back our underwrite in one fell swoop. But the messages that I've received from just about every group that I speak to is that that wouldn't have been the way to go. And so we push on. We've got a 10-year licence ahead of us. This is the first year coming up of that licence, so we definitely have to have a long-term view, as well as not taking our eye off the ball with the short-term challenges as well. So, some of these activations that we're doing with the community, I'd love to think that there are community-minded organisations, commercial organisations that will step into the breach and assist with keeping those programs going in the future. And part of the motivation of committing to them is that we commit to them, deliver them, and then we've actually got a product we can show to those commercial partners to try and get them to jump on board and support in their capacity.
Thank you. Councillor Donaldson, would you like to make a comment?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair, and a really good question. Just like to add to what Ariki's saying, and as well as growing the corporate sponsorship, I just want to acknowledge the partners, the other partners in this public-private partnership, the input from them. So Tuck's business, he's trained up a number of his staff to be New Zealand Mountain Bike Association commissaires, so they can officiate in at the likes of the Secondary School Champs, which is a Cycling New Zealand sanctioned event. And a lot of his staff resource goes into delivering this event. Also Skyline provide the venue free. In that event family pass for up to 5 people, that includes free access to the gondola. Now, a trip for 2 adults up and down the gondola on any other day of the week is $60. So you've got that every day for all people on that pass, free access to the gondola at Skyline, free access to the venue. We do, by keeping it ticketed for the key events that are live on television, we have some control. And so there's security issues around that because it is a very high-profile international event. But I just wanted to acknowledge the contribution made by the other partners to the company, which is not for profit.
Thank you, Councillor Donaldson. I think the seed sowed by Councillor Tapsell last year has certainly been grabbed with both hands, and I've got a thing that we'll note from the comments that have been made for the CEO to bring back some information for us. Councillor Kumar.
Thank you, Chairperson. Thank you, Ricky and Dave, for your presentation. I really wish you guys all the best and success, and hope that your success flows through to Rotorua Inc. At large, and that's what this whole thing is about. I think you kind of answered my question, the fact that your license is for 10 years. I just wanted to know the tenure, because council are shareholders and partners in that. I wanted to know to what extent it would, and whether it could be terminated earlier if you didn't deliver on style and merit. Thank you.
Yeah, so the license has got out clauses at different stages. So yeah, we completely understand that the financial climate and can change very dramatically over a 10-year period. So there's out clauses protecting both Crankworks International and us as a local body. So our challenge is on multiple fronts, and one of those fronts is making sure that we keep raising the bar each year and we keep pushing into new spaces, and we've got that eye on the future to make sure that we have space to step up. So that is a challenge, and yes, there are out clauses where both parties could exit the relationship if we get to a state where we're not sure that we can deliver.
Mr. Basani Tule. Don't touch it.
E rau rangatira mai, tēnā koutou, ngā mihi o te tauhou. Kia ora, Mr. Chairman. Kia ora, Ariki and Dave. Thanks for the presentation. Last year, we gave a lot of feedback during the question time, and I'm happy to hear that you've opened up for more whānau, more rangatahi and tamariki inclusion, and also that you've taken on the 200 to 300 points made by the public, and you'll be working on it to improve the event. I'm just wondering how much was generated in 2017 from the event?
Generated in terms of overall revenue?
Yeah, overall revenue.
Are you talking about economic benefit? Yeah.
Ooh, I can't remember off the top of my head what the figure was. Maybe
so
it's
over 3 years, the economic benefit has been assessed by APR consultants in the vicinity, not precisely, but in excess of $15 million. The media PR value of the event last year was $7 million. And that's really what this animal is it's a global media marketing exercise for a destination which wants to showcase itself as a mountain biking mecca.
And what are your targets for ticket sales this year?
We have targets for individual ticket sales over family passes, adult passes. We've got financial targets as well. Our financial target is about 15% up on what we did last year. With the prices that we've cut, we need to increase the volume and the number of actual tickets that we've sold. I can give you numbers, but they're kind of a bit meaningful without the data that goes in behind them. For instance, a family pass is 1 ticket, but it's actually 5. So there's kind of a bit of formula that goes behind it when I give you an overall number. But what I can say is that in December, we were ahead in ticket sales in December from what we were 2 weeks out from the event last year. So whether the new approach that we've done has just displaced ticket purchases so that they buy earlier, or whether that's indicative of significant growth, we won't find out until the event hits. But that's also going to be subject to things like weather, which has had me sweating lately for sure. So,
yeah, is there, like with recent council events, do you have a plan B for ticket sales if it gets a bit sluggish? Or?
Well, we try not to put too much stake in the ticket sales themselves, and we've been pretty conservative with the figures that we're aiming for on that front. I try and keep a few levers in the back pocket that I can pull in the case that things start to go awry. I think in the next probably 4 weeks I'll have a much clearer picture of exactly what we're relying on ticket sales as we wait for different funding partners and sponsors to confirm. So I think probably 3 to 4 weeks out I'll have a pretty good steer on what we're requiring. I'll have a pretty good eye on the weather, and I'll have my levers ready to pull if we have to do cutbacks to try and deliver the event as close to a break-even as possible. So we'll try not to sacrifice some of the programs that we're working on. But if it gets to the 11th hour and we need to do that, then in some ways I won't really have a choice.
Okay, thank you. Finally, Councillor Maxwell.
Oh, yeah. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Tēnā koe, te ariki. Congratulations for providing Rotorua with a world-class icon event, Crankworks. And I think that's a courageous move to cut the prices by 50%, 240 down to 120. So I hope the public really get in behind and support it because of that courageous move. I thought last year's event, which I've attended each one and I've always enjoyed it. You did well, and the question is around weather. You did well in making arrangements for 2 days that cost you. Are you in a position where you've got some contingency plans for this year in the highly unlikely event of bad weather?
There's some things we can't change. We've got broadcast windows that we have to fit within, so we buy satellite time 5 to 6 months out from the event, and we have to deliver the events within those windows for the international facing audience. But a lot of the changes, I mean, last year we had 17 events to deliver. I ended up postponing 12 of them. One of the broadcasts that we did ended up being a completely different event to what we had planned initially, and a lot of people wouldn't even know that. But what I definitely learned was that the team that we have around us is pretty flexible and everyone's pretty motivated to make it work. And last year, even with the inclement weather, we managed to deliver all 17 events by the final day. So I also have a pretty good sense of how far we can push the team. But we can't, I mean, there's just some things we just can't de-risk as much as I would certainly like to be able to.
Kia kaha.
Thank you, Ariki. That concludes the presentation, and I thank you, gentlemen, both. Before you leave, we just need to make a note in the minutes, derived from the CE at the next O&M meeting, an additional opportunity for Council to support community access to Crankworks 2008 and beyond. He will provide a report to us on those opportunities. So if you're happy with that, we'll thank our presenters and wish you well for the event.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Good luck.
Next item on 5.1 is the minutes of the Operation and Monitoring Committee meeting on page 7. Obviously, you've all read those. Is there a mover and a second that those minutes be confirmed as true and correct? Councillor Gould, Councillor Bentley. Are there any matters arising? All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against, carried. Staff reports. On page 13, the first item up is the Aquatic Centre. Now, I'll just get JP while Craig is coming forward, just to advise the situation. JP is the Acting Chief Executive Officer for Mr. Williams. Would you like to take it further? Don't touch the button.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just for clarity's sake, the Chief Executive is on leave at the moment, and Mr. Tiliana was Acting Chief Executive for the first 3 weeks of January, so that mantle is now passed to me. But Craig was the Acting CE when a number of meetings were undertaken as per the ERA decision. So that is why Craig is leading this, because he was wearing the mantle of Chief Executive at that time. So that's why he's leading this presentation.
Kia ora koutou.
Welcome, Craig.
Yeah, thank you, Chair.
Just explain who you've got in front of you, and then I'll put the motion that we received the
Monty Morrison, our kaitiaki Māori, and Gina Rangi, our kai whakahaere Māori, new one. Started this year full time, so great to have her here. So as JP just outlined briefly, are you going to do something, John?
No. Oh, okay.
We need to move.
You've all received a copy of this and obviously read it, and also the report within from page 13. Would someone like to move that the report, Alternative Management Model for the Rotorua Aquatic Centre, a staff proposal be received? Your Worship, the Mayor, Mr. Waru. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against, carried. Okay, if you'd like to talk to number 2 and take us through what the process has been, please, Craig.
Kia ora. Hilda, could you just put the slide up, thanks? So as JP's just outlined, in the January period I was in the acting CE role, and following a ERA determination and consent orders in late December, we were asked to put together the CE's consultative committee with the union, with A1s representing members of our staff at the Aquatic Centre, and as well as managers from our staff who had been involved with the negotiations at that point. This came about obviously following the decision of Council in November to look at outsourcing a contract for service to CLM at the Aquatic Centre, and there was issues in which the union and the organisation disagreed on. That went to mediation, and then the ERA determined a process following the agreement of both parties to work through. So essentially we got to the point where this committee was appointed, at which myself chaired it, and those staff were there. If I just go back a step into how we got there originally, back in mid-2017, we looked at Capability 2030, the internal review of council services, and the Aquatic Centre came under the Sport and Recreation portfolio at that point, and it was deemed that there was a need to look at it under Section 17A of the Local Government Act around its efficiency and effectively. These are reviews that are carried out on council services from time to time. That was done. There was a report sent through. If I just go through on the slide, that was in the step one of this process. So what that report said at that point was that the Aquatic Centre operation wasn't as effective and efficient as it could be compared to modern standards that were around, that was tested against. So it was then determined to find out what actually was out there externally. The officers then went to test that through expressions of interest process, and then following an RFP process with some interested parties. Now, when it came back to council, the decision was made, and the decision was made to go out to look at CLM. There was a rider from councillors at that point, was that, and it was a very firm instruction to officers to actually look after the staff's interests as best as possible in this process, and that was where those officers were instructed, and that's what they attempted to do. As it says in step 3 there, at that point, approximately 36 of the 38 staff either had received or could have received some offers of employment. Now, there's one of the disagreements with the union is on broadly similar conditions. The conditions were, the term broadly similar means they weren't the same. There were some differences in there. There were some pluses and minuses in going across to CLM. There were some discrepancies originally in the pay rates, but the pay rates in the negotiations were increased so that staff would go across on the same pay rate that they had with Rotorua Lakes Council. There's some other details of which I'm sure there might be some questions later. So that was where we got to in terms of the ARA. The union challenged the process of which council used and wanted to know essentially that we should have referred to the staff the proposal before it came to you councillors for a decision. So that was in our officers' view, they had thought they had done all those things, but that was where the union questioned it. So then what happened, we went into the mediation, and then the ERA gave this the consent, which was in the papers which you have received in the last few days. It's attachment 1, and that is essentially the document of which I have been responsible for working through to get us to this process today, where you have the alternatives staff proposal presented by the AIMWAD's representatives for our staff to that committee, which is now in front of us. So if I could just talk a little bit about that process, and it might help as I work through the paper. So the consent asked us, or the orders of which all parties agreed on a timeline and a process and an outcome. The outcome was to get this paper to you as O&M to consider the next steps. So that's what we've done. The staff actually chose to deliver their proposal to us in Te Reo Māori. That was challenging and somewhat exciting. Yeah, Joel's got that before us. As I said at the time, it was a challenge that we were up for, and we were able to respond. In the actual initial proposal, we weren't aware it was coming in that format until they came to the meeting, but we did manage to have some internal capability to come along and provide some clarity around what was in that proposal at that point. And that was with Aneta Morgan, who is in our Te Amarangi unit. Now, overnight, it was very much a very quick process at this point. Overnight, we turned that process around, and also colleagues here to my right were involved, and I'll let them speak some more. And we also went out externally and got a licensed interpreter to look at that document so we could have something to assess, because we'd been able to ask some questions back to the union once we had an initial look, and those questions were really to help the evaluation panel of myself, Thomas Collet, the CFO, and Kerry Starling, the procurement manager, to have a look at this proposal, because that was the process that had been agreed to assess the staff internal alternative model against the RFP that had gone out to groups like CLM and the other unsuccessful tenderers at that point. So we did that with the help of these our colleagues, and went back to the union with some questions, because what we felt was the proposal was it hadn't covered off all the elements for us to be able to sit there and fairly mark it against the criteria which CLM had responded, or the other tender people. The depth wasn't there, nor the examples of success. Some of the questions we weren't able to get answers to were like, would they employ all the staff still? Would they carry over? Details like that weren't responded to at that time. What they actually responded us to with the questions was that they would be willing to sit down and work out a sort of a co-presentation model, co-create something that we would then be able to bring through to council. It wasn't what any party had agreed to at that point, and we couldn't do it at that point. So we worked back from there. They've provided their feedback on the paper that you have in front of you. That's also within your attachments. And I think to actually speak about their proposal in depth, because what we found as the tender panel was it really fitted really strongly into the community element, but we needed some real expertise to help us understand that and how we could then assess it in that manner. So that was where Monty and Gina came in. So you want to talk through that?
Kia ora tātou, kia ora Mr Chairman and councillors, and yes, a very happy new year to you all. And what a great way to start with a topic like this. But look, I want to first address, those who are here and have their hearts and their aspirations to the proposal that's before us, and ngā mihi nui kia koutou. He rā no te kōrero kei ro te tā koutou whakaaro, kei ro te puka puka, he hāpori, he whānau, ngā moe moea a kui mā, kei roto i tēnei tā koutou whakaaro. So, Mr Chairman, I want to acknowledge, obviously, the professional way that this process is undertaken, but really I want to take us out of that, because in my new role, obviously I'm now two people, and this is the first time we'd have it, so I think it's important for us to understand my new role from where I was, which now Gina has taken on, and then the new role. So,
point of order, Mr Chair, I can see some of the members, because we're sitting this side and the audience can't hear, so if you could just speak up a bit, Monty, because I'm sure they're interested in the detail.
How's that? That better? Kapai? Kapai, thank you. So, Mr Chairman, I think it's important that we step away from this and really decide for us what we really want as a community. That's one question, but I really wanted to come back to this new position that has been, which I now sit in, and for me and for us as an organisation, it's important to get some clarity around that. So with that, so my main role really is to provide strategic advice and guidance to an organisation in relation to working with Te Arawa and our other iwi groups within our community. That's probably the first and foremost role that I have now, and within that I want to take us back to probably the reason why we're here. And I think the importance is that, and it's in the proposal, that we all want the best for our community. Kotahi te whakaaro. So there's only one vision and aspiration, that we all want the best for our community. And within that, the best facility that the Aquatic Centre can provide and the services that we can do for all. I make that point, and they've made that point for all. So, look, my own real journey, because it was presented in Noel, was, I'm a second language learner. Most of us of my age group are. There are very few of us who are native language speakers, and those who are pretty minimal throughout the motu now. I was educated in a system that is far different to our language speakers that are so today. So my language acquisition through secondary school, and then through completed at boarding school, and then on through teaching positions in a career spanning nearly 30 years teaching. So finally, in the last 10 years, being appointed as the head of Māori and Māori Studies at Western Heights High School. So that's my background in Te Reo. My background in biculturalism is a lot longer. It would be fair to say that a Morrison living in Rotorua, you could not help be bicultural. It would be fair to say that as an adult in my married life, having married a non-Māori European out of Hawke's Bay, and now for some many years now, certainly our children have had that ability to be able to be bicultural. And it would be also fair to say that they revel in the nature that through their children, my grandchildren, they've been able to experience what they have now. So that collective experience, I think, is what I bring in when I'm making comments today, and what has been received in the proposal. I am Ngāti Whakaue. I am in the rare position of being able to be joined by Colin and some of the others who now in Rawiri sitting here, Colin Bennett, who form what's known as the Pai o Ngāti Whakaue. We speak on behalf of the iwi and family on ceremonial occasions, and within that huge responsibility to be able to reflect their views. For myself, it's been a position that I've been in for nearly 15, coming nearly 20 years. So I share Whakaue, Ngāti Whakaue occasions, both in their happiest times and unfortunately in their saddest times. So within that, that's the experience that I bring when I look at a paper that's before me and says, how do I feel about what do I read from a Te Ao Māori perspective, a Te Ao Te Arawa's perspective, and a Te Ao Ngāti Whakaue perspective. I am by whakapapa Te Arawa, so ancestral roots firmly in Ngāti Whakaue. My grandmother is Ngāti Tūwharetua, Ngāti Turumakina. We have a family, a marae, in Waihi, at the bottom of Lake Taupo. I was born here, I te tākere o te waka, as we would say, but my early upbringing from 5 to nearly 12 was at Makitu. So from te kei o te waka to te tākere to te ihu o te waka, that's me. So to what's been presented, we know that there are common principles to effective engagement. We have experienced people who have been consulted within around those principles and agreeing to a purpose in making our community better. We have experienced people who have been engaged to be able to work collaboratively with us. There are also people who I know, who have been involved in this process with, and who form part of my early upbringing at Whakatū. And Rob Popata knows that his uncle was a classmate of mine all those years ago. The early engagement on issues is something that's really important. And we know that from past experience that that's tremendously important. One of the things that we've had, and because of the way that the presentation has been done in Te Reo Māori, it's really important that we understand Te Reo Māori as a taonga, as a treasure, and more particularly as sometimes it is used today as a weapon. And as a teacher of Māori, who for all those years, and someone who's in that Te Reo Māori space often, I see a lot of ways in which Te Reo Māori is used as a tool for communications. I want to talk briefly about the Te Ao Māori principles, which is in their proposal. And again, I want to highlight the importance of those Te Ao Māori principles, which we have as an organisation actually have already committed to. That is highlighted in the proposal, and certainly it's gone to some length to ensure that as a basis of their proposal, as I read it and translated it, it forms the basis for a work plan to drive us forward. In my position, I think that is a great place to be. In my position, I am looking for something that would enable us to be able to aspire to that, to be able to reach that in any way possible. And I think, and here was now those principles of mana whenua, mana tangata, and in their proposal, mana o te wai, whakapapa. We cannot do a proposal in Rotorua without engaging in such a way where we have whakapapa links that tie us to our land, and then the importance of the way in which we express that. And I want to acknowledge many of you, the Te Kōwhai Tarahina family. They are part of the submission, and I want to acknowledge through them the contribution that many of you won't know, that as a Ngāti Whakaue Hapu, we all make a contribution in a way that we can. And I think it emphasises for us the principle of Te Amorangi I Mua, Te Hāpai o Ki Muri, which is one of our major planks within our organisation, because we have a Te Amorangi unit which expresses that. So, in Charles, and I think, I didn't see him, Charles is here? Yeah, Charles, and, yep, they're both here, that's great. Many of you won't know, while Colin, myself and Rawiri are sitting on the pai, there are other people doing other things behind the scenes. And I want to acknowledge the boys for their contribution that they make. They are the hunter-gatherers of our hapu, and on those occasions, one phone call to the boys, as I call them, they go out doing the hunting and gathering and provide us with the seafood to enable us to welcome and feed our manuhiri in a way that's appropriate. So, ngā mihi nui kia kōru, kia koutou, me tā koutou hunga, anei te amorangi ki mua, he mihi nei kia kōru. So, the important principle there is the importance of ngā mahi tahi, collaboration. Significant and important. Pono and tika are things that which we believe in that assist us in what we do, and tika is the right processes and the right way to go about them. You know, that's my interpretation. I'm uncertain, and I don't want to comment on the way in which this has unfolded, but if that's what's going to drive us, then I think that's an important principle for us to ensure that we meet those aspirations. And really, it's the only way for us to meet those aspirations. Whanaungatanga. We are by birth, and we are by connection, and we are by whakapapa, all related. Trying to think of something funny last night, what I could say. Could I just say that the Morrison family, we tried to have a reunion in 2009. We counted up the numbers and it came to nearly 4,000. Sir Howard at the time cracked a joke, and as he sometimes and always did on stage, and he said that we Morrisons are a large family, and you know how it goes. Us Morrisons are a large family. You point a gun down the main street of Te Tānakai, pull a trigger, you're bound to hit a Morrison. And he says, I know a few people who'd like to do that. So with that comes, I think, the responsibility for us to ensure that we work together, and really the principle of reciprocation. And, you know, koha mai, koha atu. Aroha mai, aroha atu. So there's an, if you like, an equal and equitable response to everything that we do. So let me now come to what we as an organisation have done to ensure that the community is fully aware of our commitment as an organisation that we've done. The loss of Mauri Ora was a profound moment for all of us. It was something that was just so out of left field for all of us. The reaction nationwide was really quite profound. The day after we buried Mauri Ora, I was asked if I could fill the position that I'm in now. There was no way, absolutely no way, that Mauri Ora's vision and that he had was going to be entrusted to one person. Mauri Ora was fantastic, but really it was the opportunity for me to be able to recognise and for us to create. If Mauri Ora was an example of excellence, and he was one man in the organisation. My dream is to create many Mauri Oras in this organisation. And so this organisation is committed to a bicultural and a bilingual program that has been unfolded since that time. Know that the program Te Amorangi Ki Mua Te Hapai o Ki Muri, we have created some and made some great gains with that. We recognised that we needed to undertake a staff survey at that time in late 2015, and the results of then really showed us that staff really wanted to make a commitment to build a better Rotorua. They wanted to know more about the Treaty of Waitangi. And so we have done two things, and many of the community have attended them. Those are the lecture series which we have held, and then we have Marae Noho for staff, which is now into its second year. All staff attend them. By the end of this year, all current staff would have attended, and all new staff, of course, as they start, it's now common practice for them to attend those marae noho. The establishment of the Te Amorangi unit, as we know it, our own staff wanted to build that capability to support each other and to support their fellow colleagues. And so there was a strategic plan being well developed and well enunciated and well progressed out to the rest of our staff. We acknowledge that there's lots of work to do. New staff come on board and they need help. We have made some key appointments. Aneta Morgan joined us pretty quickly and is now a Tier 3 manager and leads the Te Amorangi unit. Ben Manley, many of you know, an accredited researcher, given public lectures on the Fenton Agreement, which again the community felt was important to know and understand. Since that time, Ngāti Rangiwewehi, a son of Ngāti Rangiwewehi, has been appointed, and Michael Hancock, and he is an economics advisor. We have begun a process since I began looking at how we were engaging the rest of the community. We have now seconded Rose Hiha Agnew to undertake a review of all our governance and operational entities with our community. And there are some learning, and certainly this now challenge before us is going to be a great learning for us all. Lastly, City, our latest, and it was with great joy that we were able to have with us someone of the skills of Gina to be able to join our organisation, recognised as one of the treaty negotiators with a wealth of background, legal background, to be able to provide her skills and her background to our organisation. We haven't stopped yet. I'd like to do more, and the challenge of this document is for us to be able to, and if I could now provide some advice to you all, is there is much to endear proposal. My experience is that the principles of what they're expounding are ours. They are us. And I use because what I don't see in the actions that I see is the rest of the words which make up trust. My silence is deliberate.
Thank you.
So with that, can I... and the next part of the presentation, please, is to the proposal to us.
Thank you very much, Monty. Gina, welcome, and first time before the committee. We welcome listening to you, and that Monty's talked about. We look forward to your contribution.
Tēnā koutou e aku raurangatira. Ko Gina rangi tohiriri a hau, he uri a hau tahu. Engari tupu au I taku taha o ki Ngāti Whareto, ki Ngāti Raukawa me Maniapoto. Kei te miha atu kia koutou. So what I just said, si whakaue tūhaurangi e Ngāti two-year-old, a 10, and I've raised my children in a reo Māori home, along with actually many of the parents that are and our tamariki go to Te Koutu. Our new parents to this year as well. Kei te hara mai o tamariki ni po tāra. Oh, I tērā. The importance of that is that in my experience, when we express ourselves and affects the whakaaro that we bring to the kaupapa that we are discussing. And my participation in this process began when I started on the 8th of January. So I was not involved in the very early discussions. I did not in the first consultative meeting, but one of my team members, Anita, did. And we fully debriefed after that process. Monty and myself did the staff representatives, and almost there was a noticeable change in the atmosphere in the room, which we all commented on, and I want to thank again the members of the staff who have presented their proposal in Te Reo. It did present a new challenge for the council because we had to ensure that we had the right processes to respond appropriately. Like most of us, I am a second language learner, and any opportunity I can have to practice in a safe environment, mai reo, is something that I really thank people for. So tēnei te mihi atu kia koutou. In terms of the proposal that we received, I read it in the original Māori. So the proposal that we originally received from the staff was in Te Reo with no translation. I read it in the original Māori, and I also spent that night with Monty going through it together to ensure that we understood the nuance and the detail of what was in the original Māori proposal. We also engaged a licensed translator, Rauri Te Waru, to provide an accredited translation of the proposal as it was received. That was also peer-reviewed by a second independent licensed translator, Tāwini Rangihau. I sat with the assessment panel to ensure that they understood what was being proposed and to brief them on the contents of the proposal. I did not participate, though, and I was not in the room when they actually went through the proposal and made their decision. My role was simply to ensure that I was comfortable that they understood what was in the proposal, and I was. In terms of, I think that's probably sufficient in terms of my engagement, although if there's any questions that you have on the proposal or any nuance. I was also asked to consider, given the key concepts that are in the Te Puna proposal, can those be incorporated with the CLM proposal? And there were two aspects that I particularly focused on. One was their capability within CLM around Te Reo Māori. One of the strengths of the Te Puna staff proposal was a clear focus on creating an environment at the pools that is completely supportive of Te Reo. I went through the CLM proposal, and there are some important points that I think were relevant to my assessment. One is that they already do provide Te Reo Māori classes in a number of other centres. As the parent of children who have attended swimming lessons at the pools, that's of critical importance to me that my children who go to a kura kaupapa Māori, go to Kohanga Reo, are able to have lessons of a high standard in Te Reo Māori. My recommendation is that if CLM is contracted, they must be directed to provide a Te Reo Māori strategy that addresses how they would provide Te Reo Māori classes for our children, but also goes beyond that to ensure that the entirety of the pools is a safe environment for whānau Māori and those of our community who aren't necessarily Māori but who celebrate and participate with us in Te Reo. That could include, for example, professional development for staff. It could include signage. Te Reo Māori is more than just swimming lessons, and we should be working with all of our business units to ensure that they have Te Reo Māori strategies, and I think incorporating that into the CLM contract is of the highest importance. The second aspect of the staff proposal that was very important is there's a real focus on community involvement. One of the ways in which that would be achieved would be the establishment of a Friends of Te Puna community group to provide advice on the strategy and operations within the pools. The intention is that the pools be more responsive to the community need, and that by being more responsive, that would increase patronage, that would increase people's pride in the facility and their involvement. And that, again, that's a principle that I would fully endorse. In terms of whether CLM are equipped to address that, my view is that they had a number of mechanisms in their proposal to do that. For example, regular user group surveys, regular community surveys, annual meetings with user groups, and they have used in other centres community groups. I think that council would need to ensure that you were happy with the process of appointment and the makeup and the effectiveness of any such community group, so that it is truly an effective mechanism for getting community engagement. And I do think that that can be achieved through a contract. When I say that these things can be achieved through CLM, I'm not saying that they can't be achieved through the staff proposal. I'm simply trying to see whether they fit. In terms of my assessment, it's not just can it be done through the contract, but also is there a track record there? And so that's why I'm highlighting where CLM has done that in the past, that these are not necessarily new initiatives for CLM. They have done similar activities in other centres. I think the third kaupapa, which is a little bit more challenging, is around being a truly bicultural organisation. What the Te Puna proposal outlines is a very different way of managing the pools, essentially a non-hierarchical flat structure where everybody works as a team, although they may have individual focus areas. It was hard for me to assess that because there wasn't a lot of detail about how that would happen in practice, and I understand that that's the intention for requesting the opportunity to co-design. I would have to say that that's not something that this council has any experience in designing, and I think that would present some challenges, because how would we create something in 4 weeks that actually we don't have experience in operating ourselves? I think it's a beautiful whakaaro, but I'm not confident that we have the ability to do that within the 4 weeks extension that's requested. In terms of CLM, they don't operate in that way. They have a much more traditional or mainstream, I would say, approach to management. Theirs is very much a focus on excellent service to the public. They have a big focus on improving access for disadvantaged groups. They've pioneered things like women's only nights, programs to get people who don't have healthy lifestyles to be more involved in the pools and making it a more friendly space. So theirs is very much more about what the public and the community service aspect is, rather than around that kind of very non-hierarchical management process. So that's probably the key difference. In that regard, I would also say that CLM do have already a commitment to biculturalism. They have 4 years ago appointed a person to a key role which they created within the organisation to lead that. So there is an openness to that, but I wouldn't go so far as to say that it's a completely hierarchical team structure. That's probably the key difference.
Thank you very much, Gina. I think I'll bounce back to you now, Craig, in terms of you've taken us through the process. You've explained to us Government Relations Authority Directive. I want to know, as an elected representative, that has been complied with. Certainly the analysis that Gina and through Gina to Monty, the analysis from a bicultural point of view has been done, and I'd like to know the way forward from here, because I think my colleagues around the table, we've got two alternatives in front of us, and we need to know what the implications are of A or B and where to from here, because there is acknowledgement that there are aspects in the staff's proposal that can be incorporated in any agreement, regardless of who it's with. Great, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Today, with the paper coming to you, were these recommendations that were drawn, the ones that are in front of you, the recommendations that were drawn straight from the agreement. So whatever you decide at that point, that would satisfy the determination that was passed on, the consent order from the ERA, so that does satisfy all those conditions. The challenge is for you councillors to make the decision in whatever way you want to go. And in terms of, if I just look at the paper again, I think there's a couple of really simple things. If you were to pause and take on the ability of having a look at this, taking it further through to council, there's a delay in that in process, and what that does is it puts on hold any of the projected savings and those sort of matters that you may have gotten. It also puts on hold for staff any certainty around where they're going, puts the organisation under uncertainty about whatever decision may come out of that, and also any potential contractor, it puts them under a little bit of certainty about where that also heads. So the delay would probably be far more than 4 weeks, because it would have to fit in with, it would come back, if we went through to council, then you'd make whatever recommendation and probably come back to this committee again for whatever. So there'd be a whole another cycle. So they're probably essentially the better part of 3 months. And based on what Gina said, she didn't believe there was enough time to accurately co-create something in that 4 weeks. So there's a risk around there. We couldn't say in any honesty what that does to CLM's position at this point. We don't know the answer to that question. But there would, if it was to go in-house, and I think the Section 17 clearly highlighted that we'd have to do some seriously restructuring in the aquatic centre as to bring it to where it needs to be, and that would be a lengthy process as well. It's not necessarily that couldn't happen in a month or 2 months, but it would need to, it'd be quite a significant piece of work that could be over time. I think one of the keys for council is the internal model. All the risk lies with council as it does now. Nothing changes there. So all the risks of the community outcomes and actually the financial model lies purely with council. If it was to go to an outsider, that the financials go with them, because council would be putting its grant in as opposed to the entire operating budget. I think too, it's my understanding that I've been given is that, or been advised, is that all staff would be offered positions. That's my understanding that I've been advised. And I think long term, the financial implications, and Thomas probably got a better idea. I think the full operating model might add about 1% to any rates review across the next year. Might add about 1% to it. That's my understanding. So I think that's about all I can advise on that at the moment. Yeah.
Well, Craig, you were part of the when we got the proposals or the expressions of interest from Belgravia and CLM. We had an independent, it was staff, of course, analysed and assessed on certain percentages, certain criteria, the 2 proposals that finally were presented in full. So your committee that you formed to assess the staff proposal used the same test, same parameters as per the CLM and the Belgravia one, of which I've got copies of with me.
Yeah. So we did, as I stated earlier, though, being able to score a number was with the information at that point, because it wasn't a complete proposal. And I mean, essentially, if that had come in that earlier process, it may not have got through to the final stage. We had 4, I believe, 4 originally. 4. Yeah, 2 made it. Yeah. 3 and 2.
Where to from here? What are you recommending to us in terms of where we go forward? Because there is an acknowledgement that there are strong aspects of their proposal that can be incorporated into an agreement with whoever provides the service. So where to from here, Craig?
Could I, point of order, Mr Chair. Some of us have got some questions that we'd really like to ask before we ask a staff member to make a recommendation, because I hear a lot of information has been promulgated and we've been lobbied, but we'd like to ask some questions.
I'm not asking staff member for a recommendation, I'm just asking him for a direction of where to from here, and then I'll open it up for questions. I'm more than happy to do that.
Yeah, I think the where to from here is I can only go as far as recommendations 2, which are the agreed recommendations that came out of the ARA decision, and that is quite clearly whether the staff proposal, as it currently is, goes through to council.
Or not.
Because you made a decision at council, and that decision is live. And I think the ERA probably understands that. That's why we're in this position. So, yeah.
Just before, if you could indicate you want to ask questions, I'll get JP to just make an overriding comment.
Councillors, and I would just go one step further than Mr. Tiliana has, and really draw your attention to page 14 and page 15. So there's been discussion about the key headings and the analysis of the different aspects of the proposal being evaluated against the CLM proposal. So that is what's shown to you broadly within that table. And you'll notice it's written as questions and highlighting of risks, because, as Mr. Tiliana has outlined, the detail was not there across a number of those categories. So, and that is pretty much summarised in the paragraph that sits underneath that table. So, Mr. Tiliana has been careful to say there's 2 options that are before you as per the recommendation out of ERA, and it's your decision now to evaluate what's before you. But that panel has attempted to match what's been presented to us from the staff against the CLM proposal and against those criteria, and that first sentence of the paragraph underneath the table summarises the view that's been formed as to the proposal.
Mayor Chadwick, just before we ask, if you need to read the assessment of significance of that is, above 6.
Point of order, Mr. Chair.
Oh, Councillor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I wish to challenge that statement in terms of the significance policy. It is very clearly stated in our significance policy that where a matter is of concern to the public and there is a diverse public opinion and it becomes very contentious, it must then become a significant matter. So I do not believe that this statement, that this is not a significant decision, is correct at all. I would seek advice on that, please.
Well, I don't just, I don't want to make a comment on your contention, but you have the opportunity that if you believe it is of contentious issue and triggers significance, which I doubt, and I'll get advice on that, A would be your option, that it go to the next council.
No, that's not the only option, Mr. Chairman, but we'll come to that later.
Okay, all right.
Could be
Your Worship.
Just some questions, and thank you for the proposal that we've received. And it did raise, I have to say, as not being a fluent Reo speaker, I felt very humbled that I had to go and seek advice about what was in your proposal, which was embarrassing to me. I will get to my question. I think there's very important ground to be set here. For me, I'm concerned that the direction that was set by the authority was for us to receive in a month a proposal and a model. In your view, have we received a model that we can move on, which was the direction of the tribunal, which I think was fair?
Right.
I think it is outlined in the paragraph Gaston referred to, that we don't believe that we, and I think I said it earlier too, that if it had gone through the earlier part of the RFP proposal, it wouldn't have made the second stage, because there wasn't the detail behind things that would have been there. So,
I think it's important, Craig, that we read that out. It says, broadly, the proposal does not offer a discrete proposition for the management of the Aquatic Centre, but rather offers an opportunity to Council to go back to the drawing board to co-design how this philosophy could be translated into an effective governance and operational model. There is the potential to achieve a number of the aspirations identified, particularly around adopting a bicultural and community-focused centre under either an external contract or internal contract. So I think that's the key message. Councillor, Your Worship? Any further
No, that was my question about does it meet what we were asked to achieve? And I hear the answer. Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Bentley?
Thank you. I haven't got a question at this stage. I have got many lined up later on, but I've got a request for you, Mr. Chair, in that we've had a lengthy presentation from staff giving their opinion. And I see in the audience we're blessed with a great deal of knowledge on the proposal that was submitted. I would like to ask you to give them a small amount of speaking time.
And who are you referring to?
Referring to Helen and Rob and Kofi.
Seek some advice.
Are they experts?
Pardon me?
Yes. Artillery.
They've only had
Agreed to it.
They agreed.
They agreed to it. Was the parties agreed.
But you haven't seen the conditions that are going to be implemented.
It's if they
That's all they were asked to do. I'm done.
The actual order.
Set the precedent for inviting comment from the floor.
I certainly don't want 6 people sitting up here telling council ins and outs of the proposal, because we have all read it in depth. In fairness, and because this is of huge community interest, I'll allow one spokesman 5 to 10 minutes to come up to the front and take us through the proposal, any highlights to the proposal. If that adds, why I've agreed to do this is, if that adds to the analysis that's already been done by staff, we've got both in Māori and in non-Māori in English, the proposal, we've got staff's analysis of it, so as a matter of fairness, and I'm going against, by making this decision, we never allowed CLM or Belgravia to sit in front of us and give them the opportunity to put their proposal. So I think that
Mr.
because...
Chairman, I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
Could I ask if we could please just ask a few questions of the staff before we have another
submission.
yes.
Okay.
Thank you. Before we
So
have...
if you could, if the presenters of the proposal, one of you could come forward after we've been down the process of the questioning, because I think some of the questions could be pertinent in line with Councillor Bentley's request, and there may be opposing views, I don't know. So we'll work it through. Mr. Potawa Basani Tuli, you're on the next question.
Ngamihi ngui kia koutou. Kia ora Monty for your introduction and your explanation of change of role. And kia ora Gina, welcome to the whānau. Thank you Craig for your fronting of this big kaupapa. And I've just got a few very quick, I'll try and make them quick and questions. So my first one is, in the annual plan there was $7 million identified around the Aquatic Centre. What happens to that?
it's not really Craig.
Yeah.
It's more Mr. Colles or JP.
Look, councillors, I think through all of this is a management contract. The asset, and it's been reported to you previously, remains the council's asset, and it is a service contract that was being proposed. So the whole intention is when you outsource the management of a facilities like this, council maintains the ownership and stewardship of our asset and its ongoing maintenance and repair. And that's a relationship that's built into and recognised within those contracts. Often there's the day-to-day, this needs to be fixed, but those are often very carefully specified. But the asset is the council's and community's asset, and as is our commitment through some of our other discussions to consult on whether we need to actually improve that asset through the LTP consultation document. So if that's hopefully covers off your question about the ownership of the $7 million asset.
Aquatic Centre asset fund inside the annual plan.
The asset, yes.
Because I saw the fund and I was wondering how it all fit into this corridor. My other question was, during this entire process, were there any conflicts of interest identified?
Answer that, Craig.
Yeah, I was going to say, could you just
What,
be a
the
bit more
second
specific
part of
for
the process
staff
or the
or
first
for
part?
someone awarding the contract?
Like some of it says independent and I can't see independence. And so for me, is there a conflict of interest? Has anyone gone through and looked at a register of interest and conflicts of interest and who can and who can't be on this? It just seems like it was an all-in-together process. And I'm trying to figure out, like at the beginning of our meeting, we were asked if there were any conflicts of interest and we had to declare those. In this process, were there any conflicts of interest and were those declared?
So in the assessment panel, no, there was no conflict of interest.
No, they're all independent.
Yeah.
And my final question.
Yes, one final question.
So I'm extremely glad that this kaupapa came out of the confidential part of our 2 operations meetings. In the past, we were told we were silent, when in actuality our process, because this was in confidential, restricted us from speaking. So a lot of the attacks that happened in the public were us protecting our process and our confidentiality. So we played by our part of these rules and our part of this process. We were attacked internally and externally, but I just want to say in public, on record, that the process put this kaupapa in confidential. In confidential, we had our say. I make no qualms. I had my opinion about process. So with this one, Auntie Maureen Waka once mused to me, no, she actually told me, it's not about the personalities, it's about the process.
Correct.
And the reason the process is so important is that the people can follow you along. Are you, in your capacity as CE, or as spokesman for this kaupapa, are you happy that you provided the public and us, and we as representatives, with all of the information in a timely manner so that we could make a clear and informed decision?
I think my involvement with this came through just for the ERA post-decision, so that the information you're talking about prior to that, when it was coming to committees and things, I wasn't involved with that, but I couldn't say anything more than yes, I would have been comfortable with that. I think it needs to go to the acting CE, Mr. Gaston.
Oh, ask JP.
Yeah.
Councillors, it's a good question to just tease out, and we ran through earlier on who had been involved in this assessment process, and Kerry Starling is our procurement manager. So he is the custodian of our procurement strategy, and he works within the Chief Financial Officer's area of the organisation. So it is his responsibility to ensure there is no conflicts in the panel members involved in assessing many contracts that this council discharges. And of course there is other controls where there is the interests register that all staff, particularly senior staff, have to fill in and lodge, which is also reported and checked by Audit New Zealand. Similarly to the kind of interests documentation that is issued to elected representatives, so that it also applies to particularly the senior staff. So if you wanted to ask a bit more about that process, Mr. Starling is probably the person who would take you through how we moved through the request for proposal process, and he could detail how a panel is put together and the kind of expertise and the evaluation that goes into that kind of work.
So you're happy that we were given all the information in a timely manner for us to make an informed decision?
Yeah, I think the question you're asking, the underlying question, is going through the confidential process, because, I mean, until recently, I mean, I've got a copy of the Belgravia. That's still confidential because I didn't get the contract. So both proposals were heard confidentially because of the commercial sensitivity of both proposals. When the outcomes or the results of going with CLM were started to be worked through after our motion, that we asked the Chief Executive Officer to start negotiating with CLM as the preferred provider of the management proposal, that's when the question started to be raised, because that was done in a public way. So I think what you're talking about, Te Poutoa, is in the confidentiality we have to, under the Local Government Act, to protect the commercial sensitivities of commercial. Once the decision is made who to go with, then that's when it becomes a public issue. Okay. Councillor Gould.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I've got a question for Craig or Mr. Weston. It concerns the Employment Relation Authority, Auckland, their decision on our pages 18, 19 and 20. My question relates to page number 20, number 5, which states no signing of any agreement with CML will occur prior to 01 February 2018. My question is, our full council meeting is the 28th of February. Does it mean no decision can be made until after the 28th of February?
Henry, would you like to help us?
Look, essentially that was almost a good faith provision to say, look, we've agreed a process. The first stage of the process will be for a paper and proposal to be put up to Operations and Monitoring Committee. If it finished there, then that would be the first date a contract could be signed with CLM. If it went further, obviously that date would be pushed out. So all that was designed to do was say, look, the first of the meetings, the first of the stages is we'll see the proposal put in front of O&M. If status quo maintains and the decision to go with CLM is effectively ratified here by it going no further, then that would be the first date possible to sign a contract. That's all it says. So if it goes on to the next stage, then that date would obviously move.
If you've got a point of clarification on that.
It's a supplementary. Yes. Could you advise, Henry, from what we've heard and the aspects that we like, the principles that we like that have come forward in the proposal, could we incorporate, and I hear from you, Gina, about Te Ao Māori and the signage and the instruction and the staff, could they be incorporated into that agreement at that time? Because that's when you sign a statement of intent, or will that take some time to agree?
Look, I think it's really consistent with what the CLM proposal was in the first place. They set out a framework and I guess a track record of showing they could deliver in very different ways and working closely with communities. Jean has done more of the analysis in terms of looking at the specific proposal that came up from the union and matching that against CLM. But certainly a very strong rationale for the original recommendation was about their experience and track record of working with communities. And the advice we certainly gave at that stage was they do it better than we have.
But if we wish to add in something that I enjoyed hearing, and it's worked in other parts of council with a friends group, like the library and the museum, could that be recommended to?
Look, it could be more than recommended. Ultimately, the council still owns the asset. The council owns the direction and the outcomes and can set expectations. So it could go into the contract from day one.
And if that's the wish of the committee, I don't think we need a formal resolution regarding that, or do you think we should, JP? Because, I mean, what we've got in front of us on recommendation 1 is dealing with the staff proposal, whether it goes to council or it doesn't. But what I'm hearing around the table, there are certainly, particularly from Gina's analysis, and certainly from some of the discussion around the table, there are strong aspects of the staff proposal, particularly on the bicultural side of things, that could be better enhanced, and Henry's saying that that could be. So how do we manage that?
Through Mr. Chair, look, what we've put in front of you is a recommendation that very much follows the alignment of the ERA process. So either this proposal does not go further, which is the B, or the A, that it's referred to council, because to be referred to council is where you would potentially change your previous decision to outsource to CLM. So that's what's there as the base recommendation. Mr. Chair, what you're suggesting is the question about how could we then give direction to enhancing the outcomes being set out in the report. There's 2 options. You could either, as we did during the previous presentation, write a note to that effect, giving instructions to the Chief Executive to ensure that those details are developed up and included with any contract with CLM. Or if you wanted to make it stronger, is actually included as a recommendation separately, and I would say separately that that you would include detailing of it within a separate recommendation. So there's 2 ways of doing it. I think equally they send the direction to the Chief Executive in setting out what's required within that contract.
Yeah. I don't know what your worship thinks, but I would rather do it formally. What's your point?
I would like to signal that we change and include a formal recommendation as part of Part A, including the development of aspects to strengthen Te Ao Māori and the establishment of a Friends of the, and I like their name, Te Puna Hora or Quido.
Point of order, Mr. Chairman. Is Her Worship actually proposing a motion? Because
yes.
if not, I'm quite happy to.
Yes, I am.
She's signalling that she intends to make.
That's what I intend to make.
The question should come through the Chair, Councillor King.
Thank you.
If you'd like to draft that up, Your Worship, we'll come back. Well, I've got many councillors and members who want to ask questions. Can you just clarify, Your Worship?
I'll get it written up.
Okay, yeah. If you can give that to
it can be amended by.
We'll get our wordsmiths to work on it while we're talking. Next question is from Mr. Waru, and then Councillor Kent.
Kia ora morena tātou, Rotorua reorua, ki ne te kōrero. Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair, through you. I apologise in advance too, because I'll probably be addressing some of this I roto I te reo Māori. Ka kore pa koutou e mārama, but te mei tuhia ki te reo Māori was presented in te reo Māori. Sometimes it's difficult to correctly articulate how te wairua o te kōrero I roto I te reo Pākehā, so I'll just put that out there now. Tuatahi, taku pōtai Pākehā, pakihi. CLM, will they be taking on the costs for the capital upgrades? Because I know there's going to be quite a bit of capital upgrade. First question. Or does that remain with the council?
That remains with the council. So effectively, the operational maintenance will pass across. The investment into the facility renewals of significant assets and things like that will remain with the council as the owner of the asset.
Okay, kapai. Now we get on to my next part of the kōrero. Tēnā koutou te puna o hapuri o Kuirau. Craig, Uncle Mont, Gina, tēnā koutou I tā koutou kōrero. Pai te hoki anō ki tēnā kōrero pāna ki a te kōwhai tarahina. Ana, e rua ngā tino tupuna o kuira. Nā rātou ngā kreme I whakatakoto. Ko te kōwhaitara hina, ko te tupuna, ara ko tētai atu, ko taikata, ko tōku. Nā reira kai te noho tahi tonu ngā auri. Me tētahi mea hei whakamaumahara I a kote. Tērā whenua e tū nei te whare, kouhoe. No ngā ti tuarake. Ne, ko pai ake pēr te ingoa, te puna hapuri o tārewa pounamu. Hei whakaaro ake mā kote. Tuatahi, te reo. Kai te koaku whakapāha, me he mea kāore I tino eke taku whakapākehatanga ki te taumata I hia tiai. Engari, tērā te kōrero, ko te reo hapanihi me te reo pākea, te reo o te pakihi. Ko te reo wiwi me te reo paniora, te reo o te aroha. Engari, ko te reo Māori, te reo o te wairua. Nā reira, kia mau tātou ki tēnā kōrero. He ua te ruku ki te wairua I etahi tāema. Me he mea kāre au I noho ki tō koutou taha I te timatanga. Tuarua, tērā te kōrero, hea te mea nui I tēnei ao. He tangata, he tangata, he tangata. Me he mea au I te mau taku pōtai pakihi. E tino pai te tono a CLM, ka rau te takahi I a rata. Engari me he mea au kai te mau taku pōtai taha Māori, taha kaupapa. Ana, kai hea mai I tētahi mea, tētahi tono I tuatu I tā koutou I whakatakoto mai ai. Hei reira katoa ngā tikanga ngā kōrero, e rea mea katoa. Nā reira, he kōrero noha o tēnei kia koutou. Ka tautoko au I tā koutou tono o te tūmanako. Aha koa te aha, aha koa te whakatau ka puta I te rangi nei. Ia muhe mai rā koutou ko ngā whakaaro o te tatau o te arawa. Ana, he tautoko I te hapori, aha koa kōwai, aha koa hea te kaupapa. So, I ka waiho pēr ko kōrero, ka whakairia pēr ko kōrero Māori. Ki tērā kaupapa. Just to address the king, sorry, e hoa mā. I think if we're thinking in terms of a community, 5,000 people signing a petition isn't a small feat. Really, I'll just put it out there now, kai te tautoko aha. I support the us going further and giving our community an opportunity to put something forward. Yes, there are things that may hold up certain kaupapa, but ultimately, I te tuatahi, ko tōku hapuri ake. I te tuarua, ana, ka kōrero ki ngā mea o waho atu. So that's how I think, and that's how we've been briefed, and we've got all the information, and I've heard that we've received all the information that is there, and there's nothing else to be presented. So I just thought I'd put it out there now, so you know our position. Kia ora.
Okay, Councillor Kent.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would like to ask the staff whether they consider that the assessment that's been done and provided for us on pages 14 and 15 is fairly stated and objective. And my reason for questioning that is because I see here that under CLM you've got for experience and team capability proven with scale and resilience, where my information is that it is perhaps questionable as to whether the CLM organisation has sufficient working capital, and it is quite obvious that they're operating only at a very slim margin of profit. And if that is the case, how the heck are they going to reinvest in this for the benefit of our ratepayers?
Not discussing the CLM proposal, or that has already
Point
been
of order,
analysed.
Mr. Chairman.
No point of order.
Point of order, Mr. Chairman.
There is no point of order, Councillor Kent. Will you be quiet for a moment? The reality is, we have had a council meeting on the 17th of November, took a staff recommendation, the detail of the CLM proposal was put forward and voted, and it went through to full council and was endorsed to take CLM as the preferred operations operator at the aquatic centre. What you're now doing is questioning the financial capability of someone that we have endorsed to undertake the operation. It's got.
Mr. Chairman, will you please withdraw that? That is
no,
an insult.
I will not withdraw that, because those
That
are
is
the
not
matters,
what I'm questioning
those
at
are
all.
the matters. Councillor Kent, under standing orders, can you please be quiet? We have analysed CLM's proposal under confidential and in confidential. You are now discussing matters of a confidential nature in a public forum, which I don't think you are going to put this council at risk at. The reality is all their capital and how they run their business was covered and discussed in their proposal, which was over 80 pages long. And on the information that we received at the time in November, that's the one that we backed. So I'm not going to stop you, Councillor Kemp, but I'm just warning you in terms of being very, very careful.
I am being very, very careful.
And
if you'll let me finish,
the questions you're asking are commercially sensitive. Nobody around here, other than CLM, is able to answer those questions.
My question was whether the council report upon which we based our decisions has been fair and objective, and I don't believe it has, therefore the decision should be reviewed.
Well, if that's your opinion, don't answer the question.
I have asked whether council consider what's in front of us now is fair and objective, because I don't think it is. Because, for example, if we look at the claim here under the assessment that $700,000 is significant savings, whereas $520,000 that is the assessment from the staff is only some savings. We've got a totally biased picture being put in front of us, and I am not at all satisfied with that, and it is my belief that we should be making a recommendation to go back to council, and I propose the motion here and now, and the motion is that this committee recommend that council go back to the drawing board and properly consider all management options and development opportunities for the aquatic centre. My reason for that is I don't think we've been given the full picture, and that the decision that was made earlier on was based on part information.
Point of order, Mr. Chair.
Well, you can signal that you're going to make that.
I have proposed it.
Okay, it's been
Someone
moved.
may wish to second it. That's entirely up to
What is the motion? Councillor Kent, have you got a copy of it? Could you read it out again, please?
That this committee recommend that council go back to the drawing board and properly consider all management options and development opportunities for the aquatic centre.
Seconder?
Seconder.
Councillor Bentley. Wow.
Surprise, surprise.
Yes. Councillor Donaldson.
I had a supplementary question to Mr. Waru's
Mr. Waru's question,
which was of which Henry answered regarding capital upgrades and capital maintenance. Can you clarify or distinguish between capital upgrades and additional attractions and the capital involved in establishing additional attractions at the facility? Where would that cost lie, such as a new feature? Because I think there's some uncertainty around that.
And look, I think it ultimately depends on decisions that haven't really been made by the council yet in terms of what future investment program it's going to put into the facility. Some of the discussions we've had is that there's really a core initial investment that probably should be made into the facility to bring it up to standard. There's an outdoor pool which is slumping and leaking. The changing rooms aren't up to standard. There's no dedicated learn-to-swim pool. Or the roof is failing. A number of those things I would have thought naturally sit with the asset owner. In terms of future investment, I think there are a number of options. Private partnerships with other investors. CLM have used a model in Palmerston North where they worked with a hydroslide provider to put hydroslides in and clip the ticket and repay them back. So look, I think there are a number of different options, and I think personally, there's a core investment to upgrade the facility that probably sits with the asset owner. On top of that, I think there are a number of options.
Thank you for that. I think we need to, in terms of meeting procedure, I've got a motion on the table The motion is that this committee recommends to Council to go back to the drawing board and properly consider all management options and development options for the aquatic centre. Other councillors had signalled that they had questions, but in terms of meeting procedure, we now have to debate that motion. So are there any speakers? Councillor Kent, as the mover, you've already had an opportunity. Are there any speakers to the motion? Councillor Kawate.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm probably going to support this motion. And the reason for that is that this proposal that has come from the staff has given us an opportunity to press the pause button. I'm not surprised that there is concern in the community. Many councillors have asked questions over the last few months prior to Christmas, and I don't think we were always happy with the answers that we got. So it's given us the opportunity to press the pause button. But it is really the proposal from the staff that I would like to see considered adequately. They were given only less than 4 weeks after the ERA decision to say go back or to see what you can do and to put forward a proposal. They were given less than 4 weeks in the lead up to Christmas. They got stuck into it. They enlisted support from some community, from expertise from within the community, and presented this to us. I think it's a bit rich when we're now looking at their proposal and thinking, hey, there's some good components here. Let's see if we can put these into the CLM proposal. That's a bit.
Order, please.
They are asking us to consider their proposal as it stands on its own merits. They have the heart and the passion for this community, and it's been reflected, first of all, in the fact that they did their proposal in te reo. They did their proposal in te reo, and the explanation that we have had from Monty and Gina this morning reflects the passion and the commitment and what it is that a community is asking us to do. It reflects Māori, it reflects bicultural, and it reflects the community. So it's really that proposal that I would like to see. I have a number of comments that I'd like to make later. There's a few questions that I would have liked to direct to Craig as well. But if it means that we're going to take another look at this proposal in particular from the staff, because really that's the only one that I'm interested in. Nobody has the interests of our community at heart as much as the staff. They are part of our community. They are part of our community. I don't believe that we received sufficient information before. I'm absolutely convinced of that. But be that as it may, we have a proposal, and that's the proposal that I want at some stage to give my full attention to. So I will be voting for this amendment or this motion. Thank you.
Bishop the Mayor.
Well, I won't be voting for that amendment. It shouldn't be surprising. I think what has happened here by that proposal is that we have completely undermined our tenders panel,
Correct.
which is a process that is very professionally led by staff. My only question would have been and will be when they come to the table, at any time did the union, when they were involved with the talk of the change of a management model, did they then come forward and say we'd like to be part of that RFP proposal? That's the question I've got, because that was when the union was informed of the change process. Did they then go back to the staff at the Aquatic Centre and say, look, we've got a chance to put up a management proposal? I don't see that what we've got before us in any shape or form is a management model. It's a model it's a concept, and they say that themselves. It's aspirational in terms of its intent and philosophy and limited in detail. That's not a management proposal. That is not an RFP. So I've still got that question to ask of the union when they come to the table. Did they go back to the staff, as a good union representative should, and say, let's be in here? We want to have a proposal where we put up and we'll have a staff-run model that goes into that tenders panel. I'm very concerned, and I'll continue to speak, I'm very concerned that we've got professional staff here whose reputation has been impugned. And there are staff that we rely on when we get contracts for massive investments of council and ratepayer money. By saying that we'll chuck it all out and start again, have we asked ourselves as councillors, what does it cost on a monthly basis? What is the resolution for the staff that are distressed and concerned? And how do we best go forward? We could be here in 1 year's time still arguing, are we prepared to make that $700,000 saving for our ratepayer? Or are we prepared to find a model that intermediates between the interests that have come forward and the concerns that have come forward and the model that we voted for in November? So I'll certainly be voting against Councillor Kent's resolution.
Mr. Chair, can I just make one final point, please? Yes, thank you. Co-design and co-development is nothing new.
No.
And we could have taken the opportunity, rather than waiting for staff to come forward, forward-thinking management today goes and asks the staff and asks for their input. And it could have been an opportunity to do something quite stunning, quite unique, to co-design and co-develop something that is unique to Rotorua, unique with input from staff. And that's where I believe we've missed the opportunity. The fact is that when we question staff, the fact is, if from time to time we don't agree with the recommendations that come from our staff, so be it. We have the right as elected members to question. And I don't want to hear that we're going to be put in our place, albeit nicely, because we have an opposing view. That is hardly fair. That is hardly fair. And I, for one, resent it.
I don't think that's the situation, that you can have an opposing view around my committee member. Anyone can have an opposing view. In fact, I encourage it, because it's healthy for democracy.
It's democracy.
And Councillor Tatzel, your turn.
Oh, thank you. Yes, and I just want to support what Councillor Rotorua has said, and I will be supporting this motion. And the reason why is because I am also, like Councillor Kent, very concerned at the biasness and the unfairness that is coming through in the report that's in front of us. And I did have one question, and it relates to this motion, and whoever can answer it. In the public hearing, did a manager concede that he had failed to include in the report information to allow council to make an informed decision and that due process had not been followed? And it's a serious question that I have to ask, because this is why we're in this position we are now.
Mr. Weston.
Yeah, he was at that. I was at the hearing. I don't believe so. Who's supposed to have said it?
Well, I'm not going to mention the individual, but it was one of you, one of our council representatives.
Well, Councillor Tatzel, it would be helpful to name the name, because I can't really answer it without the name. I was there. I don't recall it. I don't believe it happened.
Point of order, I didn't hear that question again. Could you, sorry. I didn't hear the question.
I'm not going to allow this committee to be hijacked. Yeah. We are here with recommendations in front of us. We are debating a motion. I don't want to get into the personalities that have occurred at whatever. I mean, I understand that a meeting was held last night, which I was invited to, which I didn't go to, but it was live streamed, and certain people said certain things that I don't agree with, and they haven't come to the table today, but I'm not worried about that. We are here to debate that motion, and that's what we're going to stick to. Councillor Tapsell, have you got anything further to add?
Just that question.
Thank you. Councillor Bentley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The decision was made back in November.
Correct.
And I, for one, made that decision based on information given to us by council staff. One of the things that they were emphatic about was that under CLM, the staff would suffer no loss with regard to work conditions, wage rates, annual leave, a whole myriad of things. We were assured that they would remain well. it has since come to light, I understand, that so many privileges, where do you think $700,000 saving is going to come from? It's going to come from the labour force. And the labour force that have served this council so very, very well, under questionable leadership at times, I state, that I think the only thing lacking with the aquatic centre, good management. And that's up for us to fix.
That's why we went out to the public. That's exactly why we went out.
I'm talking about
for an
council
operation.
management. We have an asset there that is in our best interests to retain and grow and promote. We can't make decisions when we're told that their work conditions won't change, when that is an outright untruth.
Well, Councillor Bentley, yesterday at our run-through meeting, I asked staff exactly this, because it was Her Worship the Mayor, when we voted to go with CLM, she put a rider on it in terms that the staff will be looked after. I've also had that list of privileges and that you've obviously had and read and now believe. I asked staff, is that true? So, Henry, would you like to answer that for us, please?
Look, I'll just give a very quick general response, and then I'll give it to Richard to go through the specifics. And I guess I've just got to push back against Councillor Bentley and say it is simply not true that we ever said they would get the same terms and conditions, and nor was any commitment given on those grounds.
You did state that they wouldn't suffer any loss.
We gave an absolute commitment that we would do our best to ensure staff were looked after.
Councillors,
and Mr Bird can talk about how that's been addressed.
Yeah.
Councillors, can I also just make a plea for this discussion? And I feel it's quite serious that I've heard words like fairness of the evaluation, and there's been questions of the integrity of the officers involved in this process. I would very much like to see the conversation being steered to where it should be, which is to say what's been presented to us did not provide adequate options, or further information could or should have been requested. I find it actually quite unfortunate if we're starting to say in any way there was a question about the integrity or the process or the fairness of the evaluation going forward. And I think councillors need to be very careful in how they're talking to this subject. Again, councillors, and I will keep going on this basis, we undertook a Section 17A analysis at the beginning of this process, and that was undertaken by officers, and there's a list of options for how a service is delivered detailed within Section 17A. So it's a requirement of council to consider some services and evaluate it against that 17A. If councils felt there was other options that should have been explored, we have had a number of steps through the process where there should have been a pause and a request for a different approach. If you felt the options being presented by officers were not extensive enough, expansive enough, or innovative enough, and I think that's the right way to describe it. I think similarly to make criticisms of the evaluation which is in this report has been very carefully undertaken by the staff. And the assertion versus a $700,000 saving versus a $500,000 savings, again, is a balance that they have made in their evaluation against the track record of CLM in managing many swimming pool complexes versus what they had in front of them from the staff, which appeared to be aspirational as it lacked the detail. So that is the basis for some of that evaluation. Now, councillors, that is not bias, that is an evaluation against those criteria. So could you please explore the whys as opposed to assuming a lack of fairness or integrity in the behaviour of officers?
Thank you, Councillor Donaldson.
Thank you, Mr Chair, and I will start by supporting the words of the Acting Chief Executive. When I first got onto council, a former mayor who was involved in our orientation, Graham Hall, said one thing councillors should never do is beat up on the staff. We employ the Chief Executive. And I've heard a lot of both on media and in discussion here today that impugns the integrity of our staff, and that is getting into very dangerous territory. Also, I draw to members' attention, if they haven't read it, the letter from Swim Rotorua, which debunks one of the other implications here, is that Henry Weston has some sort of conflict. He doesn't. He's not on the board of Swim Rotorua, and he resigned from that board in October last year. So I just want that noted if no one's read that. The whole process that we've gone through, and I'm speaking in opposition to Councillor Kent's motion, the whole process that we went through Strategy, Policy and Finance Committee, chaired by Councillor Rotorua Tate, and if there wasn't sufficient information, it's our job to ask for it as councillors. So there was the opportunity there to explore co-design, but we rejected it, and we decided to go with an RFP and select, and we selected a tender. And as regards to the compression of this into 4 weeks and going back to the drawing board and allowing more time, can I just point out the ERA determination, the parties, the Northern Amalgamated Workers Union Incorporated and the Rotorua District Council trading as Rotorua Lakes Council agreed. They agreed to this determination. They agreed to this 4-week window for a proposal. We have a proposal. I've heard from Ms. Rangi that CLM have a track record. I've heard from the panel that the proposal doesn't show a track record in achieving the savings that we're expecting. There are aspirational aspects to that are merit, have merit, and who worship wants to take that on board with a motion once we get through this vote. But from my point of view, we're here to consider the two options, and I'm opposed to going back to the drawing board. That is going to cost a lot and achieve nothing, in my view.
I think from a position of clarity to assist members in how they vote, Your Worship, would you just like to signal what motion you intend to move?
Point of order, Mr. Chair. We're debating a motion that's already been put.
I've just been guided, I can't.
Yeah,
Thank you.
I'll bring it later.
Mr. Wadu.
I was just wanting to bring up the point that Dave just brought up, Mr. Chair, that, not into the, we shouldn't be doing that. There's only one staff member that we should be actually questioning.
That's right.
And I think we all know that. Koe rā noho tāku.
Yep. Mr. Kuma. Councillor Kuma.
Thank you, Chairperson. I will be fully supporting this motion. My reasons are, we are not listening to 6,000 people that signed, but we want to save 700K. We did not pay respect to hundreds of people marching to the council with a plea, but we are happy to underwrite Mudtopia and Crankworks for the wider Rotorua Incorporation. I was told the CLM proposal was fair, so fair that the ERA had to step in. Are we listening to the plea of our people, or are we worried that in 3 months we are going to lose 180K of the 700K savings?
You've got a question, Councillor Kuma?
I fully empathise to the people, and I apologise. I didn't receive them in December to listen to their proposal. I hope they get justification. And I am not trying to be a hero.
You're a hero in my eyes, Councillor. Everyone's a hero. All right, well, we'll put the motion unless there are other speakers.
Mr. Chair, I have right to reply.
Councillor Hunt, no,
Point of order.
You'll get a right to reply.
Thank you.
Just before I speak to the motion, I do actually have a question. Am I allowed to ask that?
Yes,
Okay.
you are, Councillor Hunt.
And I'll leave it up to decide whether it's JP that answers that. I just wondered what steps are taken when a change of employment happens to employees on a collective employment agreement. Did we follow those?
We've got our HR manager here.
So what steps are normally taken when, in this case, we've done it with Castle Corp had a similar change in management. So what steps are normally taken for those employees on a collective employment agreement?
when someone is changing employer, then I guess the normal steps would be after a period of consultation, and what we would do if we were going with CLM now, we would, once we knew that the start date, we would be providing our staff with notice that their employment with us would terminate on that date. We would also be working with the new employer to achieve transitional arrangements or, transitional employment offers to try and ensure that our staff were redeployed with that new employer.
So did we follow normal industry procedure in this that would be regarded in anyone else around the country? So if someone looked at our processes, did we follow what would be a fairly standard timeline for when decisions were made, when employees were contacted? It's really just getting a chronology.
So we haven't transitioned anyone to employment with CLM yet, so I can't really answer that.
Really just the process of acknowledging that that was a likely outcome, or that was where the direction was heading for their employment.
Yes, we engaged with our employees and the union in a consultative process around what that likely outcome would be and the timeframes around it and what would likely happen to them. And through that process is where we identified really significant terms and conditions that were in the collective that we would want to that new employer to incorporate into employment contracts with staff, such as the continuing on the transferring over on the same rate of pay, no 90-day trial period, carrying over sick leave up to 20 days, carrying over record of service, and so on.
Okay, so the opportunity, as the Mayor has said, was then open for the union delegates to assist and inform the rest of the members at that point.
Yes, that's true.
Order, please.
That's about those transitional employment arrangements.
Okay.
That was.
Okay.
Yes.
I'm asking these questions because our role is in governance.
That's right.
Exactly.
And management is not something we get involved in. And for me, and JP spoke about that, the Section 17A review happened. It was highlighted that we've got a facility in deep need of change. It's failing compared to everybody else. We know that. We've delayed maintenance because we wanted to have a grand plan to do a whole lot of things. And over the years, it's just been put on hold. We've sweated the assets so much so that they're falling apart. But not only are the assets falling apart, it wasn't functioning well from a management point of view. That's what came back to the table for us to look at. And our decision as councillors was, do we try and put in another manager? And we'd had a couple of managers in the past couple of years since our long-standing one had left. Or do we see what other people do around the country? What works well? We decided we'd see what other people do around the country. And we saw that for a number of communities around the country, outsourcing the operations while holding onto the asset works really well for many of them. So then we investigated who were the major players in that, and then my understanding is we put out a request for a proposal for that.
Expressions of interest.
Expressions of interest. We got a couple back. Our very qualified staff went through that, and then they presented that, because that's all at a management level. We weren't involved, and we're not in any other things that happen under that level. Then we were presented at this table those options. We were given the background of the fact that things it had come to light through the Section 17A. We were given the options of the steps to take. We chose the option to go out and see what else was happening out there, and we chose to actually engage and see if someone was interested in running our facility. And then we made a decision based on the information we were presented on who we thought was the best. So I'm a little unsure about why we've ended up here. And I totally get the heart and the passion of staff at the facility. But actually looking after our staff, goes both ways. It's the staff in this building, it's the staff in all of our organisation. And from what I've heard and understood, for me, the philosophy of what's come through in, I personally do like the name too, Te Puna Hapori o Kura, the philosophy could well be included in any management structure. And I would hope it would be, as well as the bicultural aspect. They are classes and all of the things that have been mentioned. But I haven't yet been presented with anything that stacks up from a business model that is financially robust, that actually has the rigour that we're charged by our community to make sure that we put a management system in place that has the skills and ability to run a facility of this kind. And on that basis, I won't support the motion on the table. Stand by my support for our original motion. I'm deeply saddened, actually, that it's ended up in this battle in our community. And I hope that we will, as Monty said, the trust is missing at this point, and that is something we're going to have to take time to rebuild. But at this stage, I won't support the motion on the table.
Thank you, Councillor Hunter. Are there any other speaker? Councillor Maxwell, you'll be after Her Worship the Mayor because I'm timing Councillor Kent's right of reply to the motion. Are there any other speakers? Councillor Gould?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Councillor Maxwell.
I'm very disappointed that it's actually come to this, and I know I'd love to stay here all day and talk about the rights and wrongs from the time it all began and the mistruths that's been put out there, and times we've had to deal with it because it was in confidential, we couldn't talk about certain things. But I remember our meeting in November when we were all very supportive, urging that the staff go up and speak to our staff. At the time, negotiations were still happening, and as it turned out, 36 of the 38 successful with. And, you know, I felt good about that. I felt that our staff had done a good job in doing that part. But still it continued on. And I was starting to wonder, why is it continuing? Even why is the hikoi still happening? Because the main reason for the march was the mistruths going out there about privatisation, all that other kōrero, which was wrong. And when it was reported to us that most of the staff had accepted at 36, I was really pleased about that. And now we come to this. Really, if I was part of the CLM organisation who have, as we're told, the experience and the capability, all that, and their record stands for itself, 22 operations around the country, and receiving, it's in our reports, I've read it all there, and they're running aquatic centres now around the country, and even winning awards, I think, in Nelson and Papakura. But the point I want to get at is, if I was part of that company, I'd say, what a Mickey Mouse outfit down in Rotorua that we're dealing with.
I agree.
You know, and still pleasingly for the staff, no matter in the reports here, regardless of the option chosen, which way we go, the large majority of the staff will be still involved there. And that's the pleasing thing for me. But looking through the attributes that we have, and experience and capability, proven track record, CLM have that, and that's a 15% attribute. methodology management systems, that's 25%. And then you also have price involved, which many of us in our contractual things that we work on, and often we're told, get in there, councillors, do your job. All of those percentages come to about 75% of what we're talking about. And we end up with what I think sometimes is some games being played by certain councillors. I think some councillors have started to wobble at the knees now and are buckling. And really, what does our word mean in November? All will change in February, you know. To me, because of the fact that whatever we choose, our staff that we urged our staff to go and talk with have retained their jobs. So I'll be voting against this motion.
Councillor Gould.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The motion, I wouldn't use the word drawing board, but I'd use consultation, but that's beside the point. Staff are the most important of any business. We have to look after our staff. And I failed as a councillor last year to ask the right question. Are the staff getting the same benefits? You know, I look at, as a past employee, I look at the Holidays Act, where you've got to do either a time off in lieu or negotiate with your staff a time and a half or double time. I also look at bereavement time, you know, things which are important to the average staff member. The minimum hours, that's a key. You know, for a staff member working for an organisation, they need to know how many hours they're going to work per week. They need to know how much money they're going to take home. With going from a weekly pay to a fortnightly pay, it's going to be a little bit harder on a lot of people because at the end of the second week, their money's going to run out. They've got to be very, very careful, very, very prudent. So there are changes which have happened to the staff which I was not aware of at the time. I'm sorry that I didn't ask the right question last year. But what also concerns me in a legal document which has come to council, it says that the employee has not consulted with employees prior to the decision to contract out. That is a key factor. Did the Rotorua Lakes Council make a mistake by not talking to the staff before they came to us as councillors? That I don't know, and that I don't know whether it be binding.
Are you asking that question?
I'll ask that question, yes.
I think the question is, when were the staff first advised that council was going to do a 17A process and look at asking for expressions of interest in terms of the management of the Aquatic Centre?
I don't think that was the question.
Excuse me, point of order. I will clear the public gallery if you keep interfering with my meeting. Would you please be quiet? Would you like to rephrase your question, Councillor Gould?
On the legal letter which this council has got dated the 7th of December, item 10, I note that you seem to accept that the employee has not consulted with the employees prior to the decision to contract out.
What page?
Now, that...
What page in your agenda?
The legal document from the lawyer. It's not on your...
From the Employment Relations Authority, or...?
No, it's on the document which we were sent to by council in Stella.
So Mr.
And also
Chairman,
by Robert.
If I may make comment?
Yes, please.
So I think Councillor Gould is referring to Helen White's letter, the union lawyer, to us on the 7th of December, and there was considerable correspondence between the union and their lawyer and ourselves prior to the Employment Relations Authority determination. The point I would make is that all the claims of the union were remedied by the consent determination of the Employment Relations Authority on the 21st of December. So all of the issues that were raised in that letter really are irrelevant and have no standing now because they were remedied by that consent determination.
So did you get that, Councillor Gould? That the letters from the lawyers were presented to the court, the ERA made a determination based on those letters and the information in those letters, And what you've got on page 18,
that's why
19
we're here.
and 20, which is the ERA ruling, overrides that, because that tells both parties what they had to do.
That decision I wouldn't accept until I got a legal advice, but I'd ask Mr Weston to reply to that, whether that information is correct.
It's a court. It's the Employment Relations Authority. You won't need legal advice for them. They've made a determination that we have to do certain things. The union had to do certain things within the given time of today. We have complied. They have complied. They presented their proposal.
Yeah.
It's been translated accordingly, and now is the decision whether we go to council for further consideration or not. But we've got a new motion. Craig?
Yeah, I was just going to add to that, through you, Mr Chair. The ERA decision, which everyone agreed to, was this is the process to make good all those things. That's it. That is what both parties agreed to in that authority, and that was mediated through the member of the ERA. So that is why we are here where we are. And that is why we're following that decision. That decision is the rule book, for a better word, of what we have been asked to do and what we've been directed to do by that authority. Both the union and Rotorua Lakes Council agreed to that on that day.
Thank you very much. My personal view would be to go out to the end of the month with the final council meeting to see if we get a substantiated proposal from the staff members and union.
Motion on the table.
That's not the motion we are debating. Councillor, Your Worship the Mayor?
Yes, just a point of process, really. If we were to vote on Councillor Bentley's motion, that signals null and void the motion that I signalled earlier. So if this were to
Point
go...
of order, Mr Chairman.
No.
Her Worship signified she intended to move a motion. I moved one. There is a distinct difference.
Yes, there is, and Councillor Kent is right in his point of order.
I also signalled earlier that I would bring forward a motion after councillors had the opportunity to ask questions. So what I don't want is the opportunity for my motion to be null and voided by the outcome of any vote that
Point
may
of order,
happen on this.
Mr Chairman. There is no motion from Her Worship because she's never moved one.
Yeah.
I have moved a motion. That is the matter before the table.
Councillor Kent, your point of order is correct. If this one is lost, then Her Worship's motion, she can put another motion. Yes, JP, further direction?
And councillors, just to be clear, the directive we had from the ERA, which is captured in the staff report's recommendation 2, was to carry forward to council the staff proposal. So that gives council the chance to reconsider it or to stop the staff proposal at this point. So those were the two remedies that had come through as recommendations and the basis of this report. What Councillor Kent has put on the table is not to accept either of those, but I'm assuming from the wording that is up there, and it might need some clarification, a third option, which is a recommendation to council to completely go back to the drawing board and look at the management options and develop those. And I think that's probably just worth being clear about for everyone around the table.
Yeah, and I think that's quite clear. Point of order, Councillor Donaldson.
I think exactly what the Chief Executive says. This throw the baby out with the bathwater motion is direct contravention of the ERA determination at point 2.
Point of order, Mr Chairman.
Yes, Councillor.
We are not debating what the ERA has actually set out that this council will actually do in terms of process. We are debating a motion that has been put on the table by councillors to direct council how they will continue. We are putting forward a recommendation. It has nothing to do with the ERA. We are well past that.
No, you're quite wrong, Councillor Kent, because this item would not be on the agenda if there was not a directive from the ERA, and I can rule your motion from the chair. I can rule your motion out of order.
Yes.
If you do, Mr Chairman, you are likely to end up with a legal challenge to that.
Point of order,
Yes,
Mr
Councillor,
Chair. That's a very heavy threat,
Another
really.
threat.
Yes, I think we need to just move moderately through. Your motion was seconded. I have raised the point of process that I signalled, and I now move a
Point of order,
motion.
you cannot, under the rules of meetings.
I'm aware of that. That's why I asked for clarification, but I want councillors to be aware. If you vote for this motion that is live on the table at the moment, then we do not have the opportunity to undertake the rulings of the Employment Relations Authority,
Correct.
which is all we are discussing today. So we will be in breach of what we were entitled to do that came back to us as councillors today. It's the only reason why we're here. It's part of the mediation process, and we would be in breach of that. So I just want to signal that.
Okay, I'm going to make a ruling from the chair. I would like to adjourn the meeting for 5 minutes. I believe both sides, both parties have raised very valid arguments in terms of us. I don't want to be in breach of the ERA, but I also understand where Councillor Kent is coming from in terms of we need to understand what the implications of his motion are. That if we go support that motion, Councillor Kent, is your intention, I need to clarify this before we adjourn, that if we accept your motion, that means the whole process of CLM, the staff,
It's lost.
is all thrown out, is all gone, and we go back to square one. Is that your intention?
Mr. Chairman, if you would let me perhaps present my reply at this point, that may clarify a few of those things, and then you may like to call a break at that time, because I may clarify one or two things with what I have to say.
I'll take your reply, and then we'll adjourn before we vote, because I think we need to get this right, or we will be in breach of the Employment Relations Authority. Councillor Kent, your reply.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Those of you around the table that have memories will note that will remember that I voted against the CLM decision back in October, November, whenever it was. My reason at the time was because I believed that we should not be putting the aquatic centre out to management of any description until we properly looked at the possibilities for development of the aquatic centre. That was my reason then. My reason now is somewhat different. My reason now is that I believe that we haven't actually explored all the possible management opportunities either. We have gone out to an RFP down a certain track. We have not gone to the staff and say, hey, we've got a problem here. This is what's in the wind. How do you suggest we fix it? Which is what a good manager would do before you go outside. I don't believe that's been done. And when I see, for example, that CLM can offer savings of $700,000 a year and staff in a week can come up with $500,000, I'm asking myself, what the hell was wrong with the management that was running this place? We've got to sort the management issue out, right? So we don't necessarily just have to go hearing out to someone who's got a track record of running things around the place. We have to actually look to see what is the best for our facility, our aquatic centre, for Rotorua, for our ratepayers who've put us and charged us with the guardianship of our assets. And the guardianship of those assets is on behalf of all ratepayers. Yes, Maori, Tiaroa, and everyone else who lives in this city too. It is our responsibility to make sure we do the job right. I've had enough information presented to me. I've been swamped with emails. I've scan-read half of them. Alarm bells have been ringing all along the way because it hasn't been a case of, oh, we've made the right decision. It's been a case of, hang on, did we get all the information? And hang on, the ERA said we didn't get all the information because the ERA said, come on, you can't go ahead with that. You've got to consider a proposal from staff first. Now, the staff have come out in a very short time frame with a proposal that I believe is of a calibre that says, yes, we should investigate this further and give them all the time necessary to find out whether in fact that is the opportunity we should be taking, or whether aspects of that should be put into a CLM agreement, or whether we should throw all that out and go with CLM, or whether we should just actually appoint some decent managers to actually run the aquatic centre. We've got various opportunities here. So I want to make it quite clear that I am not critiquing staff when I point out discrepancies in the reports before you. But I have raised the issue before, and I raise it here and again now. I am not satisfied with the objectivity of some of the reports that are appearing in front of this council. And I make the point that it is staff's responsibility to state fairly and squarely the rights, the wrongs, the pluses, the minuses, and let us make the decisions. It is not for staff to try and sell the decision to us. So if any, I certainly am not impugning the integrity of any staff member. I'm just saying, please, let's actually have the reports that come to us fair and objective. So in summation, I'm going to take you straight back to page 15, and that paragraph that's been so quoted before. It says, there is the potential to achieve a number of the aspirations identified, particularly around adopting a bicultural and community-focused centre under either an external contract or an internal contract, and I would say probably on the end of that, or a combination of both. And until we do the job properly, we are not in a position to make the right decision as guardians of the aquatic centre on behalf of the ratepayers of this city. I believe the decision that was made back in October and November was misguided. The error of our ways has been pointed out to us by the ERA and by 6,000 ratepayers out there and some very dedicated staff members. I say we give them the opportunity. Please support my motion.
Order, please. I'll put the motion, and the motion is that this... No, he's had his right of reply. That's the end of the debate. Stick by the rules, please. The motion is that this committee recommend that council go back to the drawing board and properly consider all management options and development opportunities for the aquatic centre. There have been no amendments. Craig,
Could I just ask a question of clarification of Councillor Kent? So are you saying using the proposal as to work this up? Yeah.
No, I'm not.
I was just wondering.
No, as I have stated, the staff have put forward a proposal because the ERA say that they should have the right to do so. We've listened to that proposal, and I say, and I hope my fellow councillors agree with me, that the calibre of that proposal has enough good ideas in it for us to take a step back and do the job properly. Now, I don't know what the outcome of that's going to be in the end.
I think that clarifies for it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So, if I haven't made my position clear. So why doesn't A meet your objective? Why doesn't A,
because
under
that's not what I've proposed, Mr. Chairman.
Why doesn't A, under the original recommendation...
Sorry, that is a recommendation from staff. This is a motion put forward by a councillor. Can we please vote on the motion and follow procedure?
Point of order.
Point of order, Your Worship the Mayor.
Could I just seek some clarification?
Sure.
Because you've got here, in this proposed motion on the table, we chuck everything out and we go right back, which means opening up RFPs.
I haven't said go right back. I have said, if you'll give me... Go back to the drawing board. Says reconsider.
You actually said that you would take the motion. You gave him the right to reply. We're rebating.
Yeah.
No, I'm seeking clarification.
No, from the chair, Mr. Martin, I can allow a member to seek clarification. Councillor Kent, would you just like to repeat what you just finished saying? Because he was clarifying the question.
I'm not saying throw the baby out with the bathwater. I'm saying put it on hold, sit all around the table and come up with what's the best option, which may be part of that, it may be all of it, it may be all of the staff suggestion, it may be something else. But we are not in a position at this stage to go the A or B option.
So my question
Look.
to the proposed of the motion is, do you accept 2A?
No.
Because
No,
this is
it
further
doesn't.
than that.
No, he's already answered that. Mr. Waddy, you got a point of clarification?
Yes, I was just wondering if I could make a suggestion through you, Mr. Chair, and this is going straight to...
But when we adjourn, maybe you could make that suggestion.
It's to do with the motion.
Yeah, okay.
It's just in addition to it, just at the end there, if the person who moved them, Councillor Kent, is agreeable, including the staff proposal. Just want to make it specific. Yeah, that means that the staff proposal stays alive. In this motion,
it dies.
Yeah,
exactly.
It dies.
Everything dies.
So that's what I'm just putting that forward.
That was what the mayor was trying to get clarification on.
I didn't get that from recorded. Or sorry, Mr. Chair. Kia ora.
I now adjourn the meeting for 10 minutes. We'll re-adjourn at 25 to 1. Thank you.
Do I get an answer?
Okay, can I ask all members of the committee to adjourn to the green room, please?